Hey friends, tonight we're walking into Kolyma, 1937, the world's last stop before the map runs out and the wind files its own paperwork on your lungs. I'll give you just enough to stand upright. Stalin wants gold, the road wants your back, and the quota doesn't care what name you had before the transport. What happens when you miss it? Who eats when the pot is empty? Why does the gang boss know your number before the clerk does? My promise is simple. No museum glass, no safe distance. We clock in, count the blows, and see if the numbers make a life. If you enjoy this kind of misery, do the usual, like subscribe, tell the algorithm you survived the march. In the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what your thermostat says. Rate the wind out of 10. Now pick up your shovel. You shoulder into the dark like a door that sticks. Breath-cutting thin ribbons that sting your nose hairs and vanish, and the barracks coughs you out in a clot of bodies that smell like mouse nest wool, boiled socks, and the iron tang of long hunger. Boards creak under felt boots slicked with rime. The plank path is churned into frozen ridges that bite your arches through canvas wraps. The latrine stands off like a crooked saint made of ice. Everything on it is lacquered white and glittering, festive if you're the kind of person who wraps gifts in frost. The sky is a low lid, the colour of solder. Your breath fogs the scarf, then stiffens it, and the fibres rasp your lips when you speak. Someone behind you laughs without humour and calls out the time in a voice that has been stepped on. The sound freezes too, and falls at your feet like small glass. The gang boss, an Urkar with blue stars sunk into his shoulders like someone hammered night into him, counts you with a thumb, not eyes, and says the norm is 20 cubic metres, or explain it to the snow. He calls you poeta because you used to write invoices, or maybe once said please. The pics are smooth where palms have bled splinters away. Tar and sweat have made a dark varnish that gums your fingers even through the wool. Breakfast was soup that tasted like yesterday trying to apologise. Bread like rope and regret. Tea that remembers leaves as a rumour. A sled croaks past with a coil of chain that smells of cold iron and old blood. The links knock like teeth. For warmth, the guard suggests enthusiasm. For a joke, the guard suggests the same thing. Fire-thawing is the game. You lay brushwood, coax it with matches stingy as clerks, burn the skin of the earth until it weeps and softens, then hack into black, wet permafrost that smokes like a living thing sworn to secrecy. Steam beads on your lashes and freezes there into a fine grit. You blink sand, not tears. Every swing starts in your hips, drags your coat against sweat that turns to sleet on your spine, and lands with a feel like hitting old bone. The gang boss whistles instead of shouting. The tune is cheerful and soaked in vinegar. Your lungs pull air that feels sharpened on a whetstone, and each breath taxes you like a minor crime. The shovel bites wrong and wraps your knuckles, a clean white flash that is dangerous precisely because it feels clean. You tuck your hand back in your mitten and tell the shovel you're sorry, like it's a dog that misunderstood you. A sliver of ice slides between scarf and throat and melts slow as forgiveness. It creeps down your chest and settles in your belly, where it decides to live. Above the pit, a guard stamps his feet in a dance invented by men who pretend they aren't cold. The leather cracks like tiny whips. Your breath tastes of tin. Your mouth makes steam you could almost eat if food had that kind of decency. Lunch arrives by rumour and then by bucket. Grey porridge that has opinions about your optimism, and fish soup where the fish is an idea floating under a greasy punctuation mark. The Urki eat first, which saves time for everyone who likes disappointment early. You watch your ladle scratch the bottom as if you might find a coin, and instead you find a thorn of scale that stings your tongue and proves you're alive. You trade a cigarette butt rescued from slush for a thumb's worth of extra kasha, and it tastes like damp paper and victory. If you're watching this from a heated room, maybe don't complain about a draft. Here, a draft is a promotion. Back to it. The road wants gravel and bodies to spread it, so you drag sledges loaded with frost-glued stones that squeal against the runners and leave a scar across the white. Your shoulders ache like hinges that someone salted. The rope saws your coat where padding thinned to confession weeks ago. A truck coughs once somewhere far off and dies like a joke that ran out of air. Mostly there is only wind, and it moves snow around in small, mean ways, sanding your cheeks until they feel borrowed. The gang boss clicks his tongue when he adds numbers no one will see. His pencil scratches warm little lies that might keep 3 men from punishment and feed one of them an extra spoon. Quota is a god you don't believe in, but still cross yourself for when no one is looking. You keep moving because stopping means the wind remembers your name. The sled wobbles on a rut and bangs your shin with a thud that blooms hot, then cold, then nothing. Snow squeaks under boots like chewed chalk. When you exhale through your teeth, a thin whistle forms, embarrassed to be music. The Urka ahead of you wears a fox fur ear flap that used to belong to a fox. Now it belongs to his reputation. He swears at the horizon for not being closer and spits, a neat bead that freezes before it lands and skitters like glass seed across the crust. Your gloves ache with other men's sweat, a sour varnish that never warms. When the rope jerks, the sled answers with a tired groan that buzzes your molars. Somewhere timber cracks and a laugh follows, dry as tinder. Everything here sounds like it's about to splinter. You keep your head down because the sky offers nothing but a lid, and lids are for boxes. The fire thawing goes sullen, wood popping with wet coughs, and the pick shrugs off the first 3 blows as if insult is a layer of ice you must crack before the earth will listen. Your wrists grind. Grainy pain walks the bones like a man checking doors, rattling each latch to make sure it fails. When the soil finally loosens, it exhales a damp breath that smells of leaves that never met sun, and steam runs up your sleeves to your armpits, where it will freeze again by the time you straighten. Someone starts a joke about Moscow sausage and forgets halfway through, laughing anyway because hunger has better timing than comedians. You lean into the swing, hip, shoulder, elbow, a crooked machine, and the pickhead bites with a small squeal like a secret that didn't want to get out. A convoy slides past, 2 sled horses with ribs like washboards, a truck groaning behind them on a rope umbilical, all 3 crusted in a sugar of frost. The driver's goggles are white coins. He looks like a saint painted by someone who hated faces. On the bed, barrels list against dented crates stamped with letters you mostly can't read. The one word you do make out is salt, which your tongue recognises before your eyes and starts begging for like a child who spotted a bakery. The Urka taps the staves and nods, the private priest of scarcity, and the sound is hollow enough to make you ache. Rumour says sugar came last week and went straight to the guards. You believe it because sweetness travels faster than legs. The convoy leaves a breath of diesel, hot rope, horse, and the memory of something like warmth that dies before the next gust. By mid-shift, your mittens are small museums of other people's sweat, stiff where rope polished them, glazed where breath settled and learned to live as ice. The gang boss waves his pencil like a conductor, who respects only percussion, and the rhythm he wants is stone, lift, curse, drag, breathe, cough, glance, repeat. Your back is a ledger that keeps new entries in a cramped hand. Every slip is a surcharge. Every stumble a memo no one will read until it costs blood. A sliver of granite peels your sleeve and kisses skin. The sting is clean and almost friendly compared to the slow ache that squats under everything. You tuck the tear under your belt and pretend you didn't notice, because noticing is energy and energy is rationed. The pile grows like a patient lie, and the road takes it without thanks. You learn the faces for cold, the pinched nose mask of the clerk whose fingers never thaw, the glossy-eyed stare of the boy who still thinks mothers are a place rather than a grammar, the smug flush of the guard who found vodka somewhere warm and hid it somewhere warmer. Your own face is whatever the scarf allows. In the pit, a man named Gennady coughs until he folds, then stages his breath like a stubborn mule and climbs back into himself. He says he's a carpenter. His hands agree, knotty and stubborn, a map of blows and splinters and patient joints. When he laughs, it's a dry plane shaving curling off a board, proud and useless. He asks what you were. You shrug because nouns get you hurt and verbs by soup. He nods once, like he just planed a straight edge, then swings until steam coats his beard in hoarfrost. The son is an employee who shows up late and leaves early, skimming its wages across the ridge and throwing you a stingy strip of gold that makes the ice glow like stained glass, in a church where all the saints are accountants. You heat a spade in coals until it smokes sap and metal, then shove it into crust. Water hisses like a rumour when it hits the air and turns to lace before you can claim it. Your toes complain in a dull, bureaucratic way. Forms misfiled, requests pending, appeal denied. Somewhere a crow saws the sky with a voice like rust, and you envy it for knowing only one job. Break arrives as a concept, not a mercy. You stand while not moving, gnaw bread that crumbles like gypsum, drag it through soup to trick it into being substance. The Urka flicks a knife with a lazy thumb and shares nothing but opinions. You trade a stitch of thread for a sip of tea and pretend the bargain honoured you. Then the horn, more wounded cow than machine, moans across the cut, and you shuffle to the line where the tally waits. The boss uses a stick to point at boxes on his sheet you can't see. Your number becomes a sound in his mouth, and the sound decides whether the soup will remember you tonight. A guard checks your belt for contraband with 2 board slaps and finds nothing but the heat evacuating your coat. On the path back, the wind turns, cruel as a clerk on Friday. Snow lifts itself and walks uphill at you, and your eyelashes clump into a pale fence you blink through. The watchtower windows are little black nails hammered into the sky. You say nothing. The road swallows your footprints faster than you can make them, practical as a bookkeeper closing a line. The mess line has its own weather, breath pooling into a low, grey cloud that smells like herring brine, wet wool, and the sweet, sick edge of coal smoke. A scale with a gummy pan measures bread by grams that feel personal. The guard draws a taut wire through loaves so cold the cut squeals, and the slices stack like tiles from a burnt house. Your ration fits your palm when your palm is numb. You slip it under your coat to thaw, warm it with ribs that have other priorities, then sink it into Belander so thin it reflects your face back as a rumour. The soup tastes of heated water and remembered fish. You chew the bread until it agrees to be something else. Steam beads on your eyelashes and then decides to be ice. You blink flakes. The stove gives from the belly what the sky refuses from the face. Short, grumpy breaths of heat that smell of tar and straw. A man behind you claims he once had butter. Everyone listens like you're all hearing a joke you don't have the words for yet, and you swallow as if the memory might have calories. The barracks is a long wooden cough, with bunks nailed into it like bad ideas you can't pry out. Straw crackles under the canvas as if you're sleeping on dry insects. Surprise, you are, and they have the courtesy to introduce themselves in waves that make your skin fizz. Lice know your schedule and keep better records than the office. You hunt them in the seam light with a thumbnail, crack them, wipe the proof on the bedboard and call it a win. Boots wait by the door like sullen dogs, stiff with frost and old sweat. You stuff them with paper gone soft as cabbage and hope the shape remembers you in the morning. The stove tender, a petty king with a rag for a crown, rations heat with a poker like a sceptre. A cigarette butt buys you a shove of coal, a favour buys you a place closer to the iron. You tuck your spoon in your boot, wedge your bread under your shirt and make your pocket look empty, because pockets here are invitations written in a language everyone understands. Because you are short on the tally, a bonus chore materialises with the kind of optimism only punishments have. You and Gennady shoulder a yoke and hang water pails from it, sloshing slush that smells like iron and old fish, and you walk to the well by the watchtower where the wind keeps its knives. The hole is a black mouth ringed with a crust of shattered stars. You break it with a pole until it yawns and a damp breath steams out like an animal's. The rope burns your palm through the mitten in a slow, polite way. No rush, we'll get there. And the bucket bumps the lip, spilling a slip of water that turns to glass before it reaches your boot. A dog worries a chain somewhere in the dark and the links gossip on stone. The searchlight drags across your backs and moves on, satisfied that 2 shadows equal 0 trouble. You carry the yoke home on shoulders already chewed. It feels like wearing someone else's mistake for jewellery. Inside again, the barrack smells richer. Soup, ash, men, damp blankets that forgot what dry meant before you were born. Gennady produces a sliver of wood from somewhere legal enough, and a pocket knife that has outlived its owners. He shaves the sliver into a wedge for your heel, tongue caught in his teeth, muttering about grain and patience as if the board could disagree. His breath is a ghost on the air. It settles silver on his moustache and makes him look older than the year in his file. You trade him 2 threads and the secret of where the draft doesn't reach. He nods like a foreman approving a joint, then taps the wedge home with the hilt until the boot stops listing. The stove thumps, a puff of spark climbs and dies against the rafters, and a little snow sifts through the chinks as if the night had thoughts about joining you. Sleep comes like a thief who's bad at doors. You hear it, watch it, pretend not to see it, and then it's in. Your jaw chews in dreams because your stomach is writing letters it can't send. You wake to your own teeth complaining like workers after a speech. Somewhere outside, a sled goes by with chains singing, and the sound threads the room so cleanly it feels like the night is stitched to your pillow. The guard kicks the door, throws in a line of light like chalk across a board, and counts heads as if numbers are warmer than people. If you're watching this from under a blanket, rate it. 10 out of 10 would rap again. Here a coat is a contract and the terms are non-negotiable. Podyom cracks the dark open with a shout that has eaten 1,000 throats. Everyone sits at once, a field of scarecrows deciding to be men again, and the straw answers with a collective sigh like resignation leaving the building. Your shirt is a sculpture of yesterday's sweat. You pry it off its own shape and wince when the fabric kisses raw skin. Boots are an argument. You win by persuasion. Heel wedge holding. Laces stiff as wire. Toes negotiate room with curses. Outside, the sky is a blank receipt the day will itemize with your back. You pass the latrine where steam rises off a plank the colour of old bone, and breathe through your nose because dignity is cheaper that way. At the tool shed, picks lean together like tired dogs. You choose one by weight by the feel of old blisters fitting new. Coffee is hot water with ambitions, but it scalds you awake just enough to sign the morning with your breath. You line up under a sky the colour of sheet metal and breathe steam you could stack like sod if warmth were a building material. The brigadier, scar-split lip, frost-powdered lashes, reads names that are really numbers and marks a dot when a sound answers. Your sound is hoarse, trapped behind scarf and sleep. It comes out like a coin dropped on stone. A man with a broken ear stands one place ahead, wobbling on feet wrapped in rags the colour of old meat. He says nothing because saying hurts but breathing is mandatory. The snow under you squeaks like cheap hinges. The boards of the parade ground knock back at the boots as if arguing. Coal smoke sours the air and settles on your tongue like a smudge you can't spit out. Somewhere by the shed a bucket tips and rolls, ringing thinly. The sound is too clean for here, and men look up like dogs that remember bells from a better winter. The march to the cut is not a march so much as a communal negotiation with friction. Snow hisses under the column, and the wind takes minutes off you the way bureaucrats take Sundays. Your shoulders agree to carry the pick. Your hands disagree at first touch, then adjust with the grim politeness of colleagues forced to share a desk. Gennady mutters about wood grain because it keeps his jaw moving, which keeps his face warm, which keeps him here. Up the slope, sled rails gleam like frozen tongues, and your breath streams sideways, a ribbon that stings your cheeks and smells faintly of wool and tin. The rope on your shoulder saws a polite groove through padding, the kind a clerk might admire. At the face you light fires in a seam of brush that smells of cat urine and resin, and the first flame licks your knuckles through a hole in the mitten you didn't notice last night. Heat bites, then leaves, a petty manager with too many keys, steam billows and catches light in dull halos. The thawed skin of permafrost sweats and goes soft under your pick like cartilage, then stiffens again if you give it time to think. The strike rings your wrists, metal humming inside bone. After 20 minutes your arms feel stuffed with wet sand. You breathe through your nose to save your throat from razors. Your moustache freezes into a comb of white pins that scratch your lip when you speak. Quota is printed on a board nailed crooked to a post. Neat numerals that pretend to be reasonable. 20 cubic now, more by spring, which here means wind with different opinions. The brigadier counts in piles and lines, rough volume, then pencils numbers he will argue with later. Urky watch, amused at the math of suffering. They work fast when it pays, slow when it doesn't, and always take the spot in the wind shadow if it exists. You angle toward it and earn a look. You angle back and learn. The pencil scratches warm little lies. The scarf against your mouth has turned stiff as bark. Midday is a bowl with a hole. Heat leaks out before you can taste it. Belanda steams in a drum scummed with old grease. The ladle knocks a rhythm that promises food but delivers theory. You dunk bread until it learns to be brave, then chew until it agrees. The soup smells faintly of fish, strongly of metal, and underneath that, despair, thin as wire. A man with a price on his head somewhere south tells a story about saffron and eggs, as if he's building a roof you can stand under. His breath plumes and freezes on his collar, sequins of frost that glitter like sarcasm. You smile with your teeth closed because chewing uses less air than laughing. Work again, because work is the day's shape and there are no other shapes available. You and two others set sledges, heave rocks whose cold sinks through wool and bone like a reprimand, then lean into the traces until the runner's groan. The rope bites your shoulder through coat and padding, A slow burn wakes under the skin and decides to stay. Snow dusts your eyebrows and clumps in the seam of your hat. When you wipe it away, the glove leaves a wet smear that the wind salts into sting. The runners croak on the packed path, leaving a shiny scar. A truck somewhere coughs diesel like a bad joke and dies before the punchline. By evening, the light peels away like old paint and the wind comes clean through the cut, uninterested in your modesty. The Brigadier calls last 10 minutes and everyone moves faster, not because orders matter, but because the body wants this counted. Your arms find a rhythm that feels almost like owning them. A pick tooth chips, a shard knives your cheek and starts a thin warm line that the air immediately bargains into ice. You taste iron and wool. A guard above the pit smokes with his glove off. His fingers glow red and shiny, and the cigarette smells sweet and rotten at the same time. The final tally is boots thudding a plank, breath tearing free in ragged flags, and the snow looking up with the blank face of a clean fingernail. The walk back scours you more than the shift. The wind finds the wet in your collar and upgrades it to ice, and your thighs throb in a slow, bureaucratic rhythm, as if pain had to stamp each document before it moved on. The column stretches and knots, men veering toward any scrap of lee like moths that learned math. A guard trotting the flank keeps time by slapping his mittens, each pop a neat office stamp of authority. Smoke leaks from his scarf and smells like cheap tobacco and better luck. The snow underfoot squeaks like rubbed glass and then goes silent where the crust is slick, and your boot finds both sounds by accident. Breath thickens inside the scarf until the wool tastes of iron and old teeth. You pull it down to spit, and the spit rings tiny and clear on the hard path. A useless ornament. You count boards under the gate as a superstition. When you lose the number, you swear you feel the night take a step closer. Search at the gate is intimate and bored. You spread, you cough on command, your pockets turn inside out like mouths too tired to gossip. A guard's fingers paddle through your hat as if he's fishing. He finds only sweat salt and a lice runway and sighs as though it's your fault the Arctic lacks surprises. The Urki breeze through with the practised innocence of saints who know the chapel schedule. One winks past a tooth the colour of parchment, and the Brigadier pretends not to see a spoon change ownership twice in the same breath. On the edge of the yard, the punishment box squats like a crate for storing night. A man inside coughs steam through a crack, and the sound lands on the snow and breaks. Chains leave dull arcs where they dragged, stuttering commas in a sentence no one wants to read. The search ends with a slap to your belt, a shrug that says you're not worth the paperwork, and the wind takes back whatever warmth the frisk gave you. Inside the mess, a wet heat slaps your face, thick with coal, cabbage, and men. The drum coughs up stew with the enthusiasm of a clerk on the last page. The ladle bangs, the cue shuffles, and the air abrades your throat like hot wool. Your portion rides a dented tin that has been many people. Barley swells against your spoon as if it intends to become generous by argument. You dunk bread you hid under your shirt. It comes out warm and faintly salted by you. Gennady claims a place beside the stove door, palms red and grainy, steam frosting his lashes into pale combs. He appraises your mitten's new hole like a foreman inspecting a joint, then threads a needle with hair and pads the gap with felt, tutting about stitches like a man who regards the universe as a crooked board. The stew tastes of metal and wet smoke and a fish that never fully arrived. You chew anyway, because hunger never left. In the barracks, night grows from the floorboards up. The stove hammers like a sick heart and the pipe ticks as ice argues with heat. Frost feathers fatten along the logs and glitter when anyone moves too quickly. Someone plays bones carved from bread, clacking damp dice in a tin lid. The stakes are thread, the cigarette's width, a place by the aisle where feet will not climb you. Boots line the wall like stubborn animals refusing to learn. You scrape their throats with a spoon and a snow pebble to loosen salt, and the scraping sings a thin song that sets your molars on edge. You strip in layers that sound like tearing paper, and rub your shins until the burn rises and pushes the cold back an inch. The skin smells faintly of wool grease and something medicinal that isn't. Overhead, a draft finds a crack and plays it like a reed. Men hiss back, a chorus of irritation that fogs and sets and falls again. Stories arrive the way heat does here, fitful, transactional ode. A Latvian with ears like folded leaves tells you about a city where trams sang and bread had crusts that cut your gums. He says apricot like a prayer, and half the barracks repeats it under breath just to hear their mouths move that way. A boy no older than your nephew invents a mother every night with new hands and the same soup. He eats faster as he speaks, shoveling words and kasha into the same hole. An Urka offers philosophy. Life is a match. Strike it on anything but yourself. Then he borrows your thread and returns it shorter, proof of his belief. Laughter travels low and dry, a rusted rasp. The stove sneezes sparks that die before they can be accused of hope. If you're watching from a warm kitchen, rate the smell. Herring ghosts, boiled cloth, and the sting of soap that only ever seems theoretical. Lights out is not dark, just less of the same. Breath builds a ceiling cloud that sweats and snows back on you in petty weather. Lice patrol like taxmen, punctual and humorless. A snorer near the door saws planks in his head until a guard kicks the jam and the saw stops. The silence after tastes of scorched rag and nicotine. The bunk slats print your shoulder blades with a pattern you'll know by touch before the week ends. Straw ticks under you like insects counting. You curl around your spoon and the heel of bread that is also tomorrow, press both into your belly where warmth outranks pride, and listen for the chain outside to settle. It does, one reluctant clink at a time, and then the night gets to work on the small things. Toes, ears, resolve. Sleep drags you under like a slow river with a hand on your ankle. You dream of heat in bureaucratic forms, permits to sweat, requisitions for sunlight, and wake to your own teeth clacking the stamp. Somewhere a man in the corner mutters numbers, and your skin knows they're not sums but days. He scratches them into the bunk slat with a nail until the nail breaks, then keeps going with a shirt button. The air tastes of damp wood and old men. Every breath fogs and falls, a tired confetti. You shift and the blanket sends up a flurry of dust that smells faintly of mouse and winter. The itch that follows is both real and democratic. In the alley beyond the wall, a dog rattles a chain until the metal finds a rhythm and then loses it again. The guard on night round opens the door for no reason except to let the temperature remember its duties. A slab of cold air topples in and crawls across the floorboards like a low tide. He stands there until the wind has taken a census. Then he shuts it and the hinge screams before remembering it is paid to be quiet. You clamp your jaw, tuck your hands into your armpits, and feel the slow seep of warmth regroup under your ribs. The boy with the invented mother finally sleeps without talking. The Urka sleeps with a grin that shows the yellow edge of an old bite. Snow squeals on the roof as it shifts. The stove sighs and the pipe ticks again, each sound a small dull thread pulling you back toward the same morning, the same board, the same pick, which is to say toward breath and frost and the ledger of stone waiting to be moved. The next morning doesn't arrive so much as resume. The dark loosens its grip a notch and the barracks coughs everyone to their feet. Your heel complains at the first weight like a door hinge that somebody salted. The wedge Gennady carved holds, but each step prints a small ache that keeps asking for a pen it can't have. You rub a thumb of rendered fat, smelling faintly of fish and storage, into the cracked place and wince at the sting that follows, clean as cold metal on a filling. Breath smokes around your chin and crusts the scarf until the wool tastes like coins. On the way to the yard, you pass the punishment box and hear a cough that sounds like a saw chewing wet wood. The frost on the crack in the door pulses with it, glittering like sarcasm. The Urki saunter to the front of the line with the cheerful gravity of planets. Everyone else orbits. If you're watching this on 2x speed, congratulations! You've outrun the wind. It will file a report. At Tool's issue, the good picks are already spoken for in a language made of winks, debts, and shoulders. You get one whose head list's left like a drunk who swears he's fine. The haft is polished where 100 palms lost arguments with it. The wood is greasy with tar and time and smells like dock pilings thawing in spring you'll never see. The brigadier records numbers that pretend to be fairness. The Urki grin, because fairness is a winter flower that only grows in paintings. You tap the pick tooth on the plank. It rings thin, a coin that's been shaved around the edge. A guard yawns into his glove and the glove fogs, then ices. He rubs the frost off on his sleeve and leaves a dark, wet blot that looks like a confession that won't dry. The sky just stands there, lids half closed, uninterested in anybody's case. You shoulder the pick and it taps your spine like an annoyed clerk. The path to the face crosses a frozen creek that sings under its own skin, blue cracks scribbling notes no one can read. Your boots thump the plank bridge, and the sound is hollow with a depth you prefer not to inventory. Fires pop in the stunted brush with a smell like cat piss and pitch. The first heat kisses the hair from your knuckles through the mitten hole and leaves them shiny, then abandons you to the wind that knows your middle name. You feed the flame, then the flame feeds the ground, and steam lifts with a wet, sour breath that condenses on your lashes and becomes grit. You swing into thaw, hip, shoulder, elbow, until your arms feel filled with wet sand and slow questions. The pick bites and squeals, a small, unkind voice. The permafrost sweats, then stiffens if you let it think too long. You don't. Your scarf turns rigid against your mouth. When you lower it to spit, the spit hits and rings like clear glass, and you put the scarf back up because taste is a luxury. By mid-morning, the road is a procession of sledges whining and men cursing in registers too low to warm anyone. A chain slips a tooth and the load lurches. You jump to set a wedge under the runner, and the rope burns you anyway, slow and intimate through mitten and coat. Pain the colour of tea you didn't order. The brigadier waves his pencil and the guards wave their rifles, and none of it lifts stone. You and Gennady lean until the harness creaks with a sound like old bread torn wrong. Snow crust breaks under your knee and packs cold through wool in a mean, crawling way that travels up the seam and makes decisions about your mood. When the sledge finally catches its groove, the runners croak on the packed path, leaving a shiny scar. Steam comes off your shoulders and tries to be a halo before the wind hires it away. Somebody laughs thinly and coughs out a thread of pink, then pretends it's a joke you didn't hear. At break, a poster appears on the post like a joke somebody printed. Shock workers, new norm, voluntary obligations, all the cheerful nouns that mean arithmetic done to your spine. The paper is stiff as bark and curls at the corners from the cold. The ink smells mineral and faintly of promises other people believed. The brigadier reads it with the face of a man counting other men's teeth and claps twice, which here is as good as joy. You dip bread into Belander too hot at the lip and too cold underneath. You burn your tongue on hope and chill your teeth on reality. A guard with a red ear tells you the gold won't gouge itself out of the hills, and you point at the shovel with your eyes, which is the safest way to answer. Somewhere a gull saws the air with a voice like rust, inland and confused. It lands on a post, shakes powder off its wings, and looks at you the way a tax inspector looks at soup. Work resumes in the grey honesty that follows any announcement. Pick, drag, load, haul, hear your joints, taste iron, swallow air shaved thin. The bent tool finally snaps a sliver from the permafrost with a squawk like a rat in a trap. You pry it free, palms slipping on a varnish of old sweat and new ice, and think, not for the first time, that human hands were poorly designed for stone. Gennady measures a rock's angle with a carpenter's squint and shows you where to place the bar. You lever, it rolls, and your knee remembers every staircase you've ever climbed. The cold finds the damp seam between shirt and skin and writes its name there, in small, neat letters. You sign beneath in shivers. A truck coughs twice, then once more out of pride, then dies, leaving behind the sweet metal breath of diesel that makes your tongue think of warmth like a rumour. The wind takes your steam and uses it to practice handwriting along the ridge. You learn that afternoon is when the ground misbehaves the most, when the thawed skin over the pit remembers it is only a scab and sloughs off in sheets that hiss past your boots. Spoil slides with a sound like sugar in a metal bowl, and you hop sideways, calf seizing, breath catching on the cold hook in your throat. Grit gets into your teeth and makes a dry crunch you feel behind your eyes. The pick heel glances and smacks your wrist bone. The flash is clean enough to make you angry at its honesty. Snow needles your cheekbones where the scarf slipped, stinging like a barber who dislikes you. Steam from the thaw kisses your face wet and then betrays you, freezing your lashes into a bristled gait. The brigadier hollers something that might be praise and might be arithmetic, voice tinny with wind. You answer with a swing because language is heavy and stone is heavier. You shovel the slide back where it came from, which is to say into your day, and you do it rock by rock because the road has better lawyers than you do. An Urka named Plyusha decides your felt liners are now his because his toes made a speech about loyalty. He announces this in the dialect of shoulders, stepping close until tobacco and dried fish replace the idea of air, and a chain at his belt chimes once like a polite reminder. Gennady watches with the quiet of a wooden plane. No show, only grain, then says your heel wedge cost 2 threads and a secret, and it would be a sin to waste workmanship. Plyusha considers the wedge like a man appraising a stool that might be a throne, then grins with half his teeth and declares that he is not a sinner today. You offer a compromise shaped like a scrap of sardine paper that still smells like a holiday. He pockets the smell and lets your liners keep their citizenship. The wind signs the treaty by slapping all 3 of you in the face. Your breath tastes of tin, his breath tastes of a port you'll never see. The chain at his belt keeps time while you go back to hauling the afternoon into a smaller pile. A sledge bogs where the creek rises into rutted ice, and the guard with red ears tells you to wade the lip and set rollers, as if water takes orders. Your boot breaks the crust with a neat snap, and the slush climbs in with cold hands, jealous and thorough. It smells of iron, old moss, and something that died politely. The shock steals your breath and your calf locks. You stand knee-deep in the village well of winter, while Gennady feeds a spar of birch under the runner. The rope talks against your shoulder in a low, sawing voice. Fibres grind, and the sound crawls through your coat and into your teeth. Your foot fades from pain into philosophy, and philosophy is worse. You can feel the outline of each toe only because the water is filling it like a form. When the sledge finally heaves forward, a sheet of ice climbs your shin and slides down inside your boot to live there rent-free. You climb out, stamp the creek's handwriting from your soles, and receive the guard's comment about vigour as if it was soup. Hot in theory, cold in practice. The Feldscher's corner, 2 boards, a table that slants, a bottle that bites, is full of iodine breath and wool steam. He examines your foot with the back of a spoon, as if you were soup he doesn't intend to eat, then rubs on grease that smells like tallow in the inside of a lamp. He tells you the first rule is no rubbing, the second is movement, the third is his opinion, which outranks rules when the temperature argues. You bite a sliver of wood while he needles blisters with something that used to be a knitting hook. A clear tear of water climbs your skin and freezes almost at once, jewelled stupidity. He wraps the toes in rags that were once shirts and are now philosophy, then orders you to walk until your foot remembers it belongs to you. The floor under your heel feels like a loaf left out overnight. Hard, persuasive. Iodine stings up your nose and paints your tongue with bitterness. Your breath ghosts in front of your mouth and you talk through it, like a man negotiating with his own weather. Dusk comes early and sideways, light bruised purple at the edges, resin smoke stinging your nose where the wind herds it under your hat. Timbering duty falls on the short, which you were today by a respectable sin, so you head for the scrub with an axe that hums in your hands like a bee with opinions. Every strike sends a hard sugar buzz up your arms. Resin spits and glues to your sleeve, and the sap smell, cat and Christmas, rides the air until the wind strips it. You stack brush the size of grudges and tie it with twine that saws your palms through the mitten patch. The bundle thumps your back, rude and regular, while you lug it to the face. Frost sifts down the collar and writes its initials along your spine. Your breath is a metronome, slow and sour. Your throat feels furred. The axe handle warms just enough to make letting go feel like betrayal. Somewhere a gull cries inland nonsense, and you answer it with the civil language of wood and ache. Back in the yard, the tally board grows new numbers like frost ferns, and the brigadier's pencil makes them believable enough to keep the soup from reconsidering you. A man discovers his heel of bread has been edited. His hand goes to the thief's collar, and the thief's hand finds a spoon, and then the guard's hand finds both skulls and introduces them to the doorpost. The crack sounds wooden and cheap. The thief grins red and wide, charitable with the lesson. Hide better, sleep worse. You check your stash. The heel under your shirt is warm and salted with your own day, and feel the relief as a small guilty heat. Coal dust tramps into your mouth every time someone opens the door. It tastes like pennies and old soot. Chains drag across the yard. The links draw commas in the snow, and the sentence they promise is never short. The wind squeezes through cracks and smells of iron and somebody else's tobacco. The stove gives a grudging breath, and you take it because you can't afford pride. Lights smear to grey and then to less. The barracks boards exhale damp and mouse, and the air grows thick with wool breath and men thinking of nothing on purpose. You strip just enough to stop the fabric from sawing you raw, then wedge your spoon in your boot and your bread under your belt and lie down on straw, that whispers like gossip you can't use. Your skin crawls with small employees doing inventory, punctual as tacks. You hear the chain outside settle into a bored rhythm and the pipe tick as ice remembers to melt only where it is watched. Your toes sting back to life under the rag nest. The pain arrives late and officious, flashing a badge. Gennady mutters something about joints and glue and falls asleep with a carpenter's frown. If you're hearing this from a room with a radiator, count the clicks and rate them. Here we count breaths until they fog the air into a ceiling, and then we try not to think about what will fall from it before morning. Morning arrives as a command, not a colour. A whistle shrieks thin enough to cut cloth. The door bursts, and cold tumbles in with the enthusiasm of unpaid rent. You sit up into breath that smells of herring ghosts and wool grease, and find your boot the way you find a lost word, by groping around its shape until it agrees to be itself. The yard is a pan of tin light and trampled frost. Boards creak like badly tuned violins under 100 sullen bows. Tokens clack into a tin for bread you haven't earned yet, a ritual that believes in itself more than you do. A guard with red ears waves his mitten at the sky as if it might file an apology for the temperature. Your scarf is stiff where breath froze in the night. You break it with your teeth and the wool tastes of coins. The column knots, unknots, then shuffles out, boots squeaking on the boardwalk, steam lifting from collars like reluctant prayers. If you're watching this from a kitchen with warm tiles, rate them. Out here the only tile is ice that argues with your ankles. At the face, fire-thawing begins its petty romance with permafrost. Brushwood stinking of resin, flames licking the hole in your mitten, and the ground steaming like a conspirator whispering into your sleeves. You feed it coal crumbs and curses, then swing before the idea cools. Hip, shoulder, elbow, a shudder in the wrists where iron sings inside bone. The thawed skin yields with a cartilage sigh. Beneath it the earth is black and wet, smelling of old leaves and iron filings, and your shovel bites like a dog that resents your tone. Steam beads on your lashes and becomes grit. You blink sand. The pick rings thin, a shaved coin. Your hands are museums of other people's sweat, varnished and sour, and the handle slides unless you tell it a different story with your grip. Every breath feels sharpened on a whetstone. Your mouth tastes of tin and old tea. The Urki run their own accounting. Plusha, with the chain that makes small weather around his belt, secures the lee for his boys and leaves you the edge where the wind keeps its knives. He tells you a story about Odessa and oranges whose peels squirted sunlight. You pay admission by swapping an hour of windbreak, and he smiles like a landlord of air. The Brigadier posts a fresh miracle, Stakhanovite feats in mines you'll never see, and asks for volunteers with the bright voice of a man selling tickets to a sinking ship. The poster smells of mineral ink and fantasy. It crackles when the wind fingers the corners. You volunteer for nothing and the pencil records your silence as a kind of loyalty. Numbers are a language that can be taught to say anything. Around noon, Etap, new mouths, arrives from Magadan behind a coughing truck and 2 horses the colour of late bread. Their coats are furred with rime, their faces are the grey of unread files. A woman's kerchief is frozen into a small sail. It clinks when she turns her head. Numbers shine on tin tags. Names are folded and put away for spring. The smell that comes off them is train, brine, fear, and a week of old smoke. One man still has city cologne clinging to his collar, sour and brave. The wind steals it like a pickpocket. A poet tries a line under his breath, and the guard frowns as if words could be contraband. You hand over a spoon's width of kasha to the smallest of the lot. He nods once and pockets the heat with both hands. After shift, a chore the colour of silence, hauling timber and the frozen weight that used to be a man. No gore, just the arithmetic of winter. Rigour stiffening into straight lines, breath long spent, clothes sounding like paper. The sled's runners scream on packed snow, the chain writes dull commas behind you. You lay him by the morgue wall where shadows stack, and the Feldsher signs with a stub of pencil that smells of iodine and smoke. Someone mutters that spring will claim what the road can't bury. Someone else says spring isn't on the schedule. Your palms stink of rope and tallow. The smell follows you like a receipt you can't afford to dispute. Night and the barracks inflates with breath until the rafters sweat. Drops patter the boards with a slow, sarcastic rain. You barter a needle made from fishbone for 3 stitches in your mitten. Gennady knots them neat, mumbling to the wall about its work ethic. The stove's iron belly exhales tar and cabbage heat that coats your tongue. You taste pennies and boiled history. Laughter travels low and tired through the bunks, a rasping saw that never finds the end of the cut. You hide bread under your belt and your spoon in your boot and pretend this is clever, not desperate. Lice patrol like clerks with lanterns. You sign their ledger with scratches and go on anyway. Sometime after lights out, the wind changes key and howls down the stovepipe like a choir that learned only one note. The pipe answers with ticks that count slower than sleep. Your foot pulses inside its rags with bureaucratic patience. Stamp, 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 and each throb finds the crack in your boot sole like a clerk finding the wrong file on purpose. A wolf barks once on the ridge, thin as wire. Men don't look up. You count breaths until the ceiling drips forget to fall. Tomorrow is already standing by the door with its hand on the latch. You close your eyes to save your place. Morning shaves the dark with a dull knife and leaves ragged edges. The whistle slits the barracks, boots thump out of straw, and the air tastes of cabbage skin and damp wool left too close to a stove that hates you. At line-up, the brigadier's pencil is already cold. It scratches your number into the day like it's carving initials into frost. The board reads, Extra Norm, Road Curve, Kilometre 142, which is how a sentence becomes a sentence. Your scarf sets like plaster when your breath hits it. You crack it with your teeth and get the coin taste again. A guard with red ears rubs them as if warmth can be argued into existence. The Urki ease forward and collect the lee like rent. Everyone else pays. A crow lands on the post and grates a syllable that sounds like work. The wind undercuts the translation. You shift your pick to the other shoulder, and it taps your spine like an irritated clerk counting the file you are. Keep moving, keep quiet, keep your soup in your pocket if you can. The curve needs gravel and obedience. You and 3 others take the sled down to the river cut, a trough of blue glass veined white, where the wind writes in cursive and nobody corrects it. Fire-thaw smokes, resin and cat stink. The ground sweats a black sheen that smells of old leaves and iron filings. You chip, load, rope sawing a groove in your coat that will be a scar on the padding by night. When the runners catch, the sledge croaks and the rope hums through your mittens like a violin played by a butcher. Frost beads your lashes and turns them into a gate you blink through. Gennady measures rock with a carpenter's squint and shows you where to pry. The boulder rolls with a reluctant sigh and finds gravity like an old friend. Your shoulders light up. A slow fire with bad manners. The brigadier counts piles that don't add up, and yet somehow he starts again. Because math here resets the way hope does. Plyusha arrives to tax your wind shadow. He leans in, chain whispering, eyes bright with that private amusement Urki keep, in case the day needs a punchline. He offers to guard your lunch tin while you ferry loads. You tell him you prefer to eat your mistakes yourself, and he laughs, pleased, because insolence that doesn't cost him is entertainment. He pockets a cigarette butt from nowhere and smokes it like perfume, breath sweet and rancid. The brigadier watches the exchange with the bored piety of a priest who believes in accounts, not souls. You angle your body to keep the wind from stealing what heat you still own. Plyusha tips his hat ear at the river and says oranges again, like a man proving he's been to a place where colour was real. You nod, then you lift, because speed is the only reliable lock in a place full of keys. Around noon the river cracks with a sound like sheet metal torn by hand. The ice shivers, a shudder that climbs through your boots and changes your mind for you. The guard yells to keep the sledge moving. You oblige because the alternative is a discussion with water you won't win. The rope burns politely through the mittens and then impolitely through the felt. Heat arrives as a thin angry line. When the runners clear the lip, you stumble, jam your knee and see white. Not from snow, but from the body's idea of a curtain. Gennady grunts a word that is both apology and instruction, and rams a wedge under the rear runner. The sledge settles with a sigh like an old man choosing a chair. Your breath rasps. The scarf salts your mouth with ice grit. The smell is blue cold, resin, old metal, and a drop of your own blood, clean as a reprimand. Break is Balanda pretending to be soup and bread, pretending to remember grain. You hold the tin in your palms until the ache turns into heat. Then sip fast because the air steals seconds the way clerks steal weekends. The new ATAP boys hover like birds that haven't learned the schedule. One has cheekbones like a razor, and a city necktie still knotted under prison issue, frozen into a small grey brick. You pass him a spoon's width. He nods and fails at thanks only because his mouth is busy working at being alive. Gennady tells a joke about glue and angels that isn't funny until you imagine a wing nailed straight. The guard pretends not to see kindness. It saves everyone paperwork. Your tongue burns at the rim of the tin and your teeth chill in the middle, and that's the weather report. Someone coughs a stitch into his sleeve and stares at it like embroidery. Someone else laughs with their teeth closed to save air. Afternoon becomes timber. The axe handle drinks your palm, resin slick, cat and Christmas in the nose. Each strike sends a clean shock up the arms. Each bundle thumps your back in a rhythm that makes cursing sound like prayer. You carry brush to the face, set the fire, and watch the ground sweat, alive and unwilling. On the slope a truck bogs, wheels greased in ice. Men push and the engine coughs sweet diesel breath that makes your tongue think of stoves. The sky lowers another inch and the snow begins its small, mean sideways, grains whispering into collars and under eyelids. Your heel wedge holds but complains in a steady bureaucratic throb. When the sledge finally slithers free you almost smile, but that would be a luxury, and luxury here is a trap with a ribbon. You pocket the almost smile where a spoon clinks like a promise you'd better keep. By the last horn the wind is a clerk closing shutters. The brigadier counts in piles the size of a man's stubbornness, pencils the lie that keeps soup honest, and taps your shoulder with the stick as if knighting you into fatigue. A guard searches belts with mittened indifference and finds nothing except the heat everyone is trying to smuggle home. At the gate, the punishment box huffs a ribbon of steam. Someone coughs inside and the frost on the door jamb blooms and withers in time. Chains trail commas across the yard, and the sentence they write never ends. A dog worries its tether until the links sing one bright, stupid note. Men don't look up. Your breath feels used and tastes of soot. You count boards under the gate again and get a different number. You decide that today it means survival and refuse to argue with arithmetic in this climate. In the barracks, the stove's breath is tar-flavoured and stingy. You thaw the scarf and it surrenders the shape of your mouth, stiff wool collapsing with a sigh like old paper. Gennady shows you a plain shaving he's coaxed from a stolen scrap. Curled wood, pale as onion skin, and fits it into the crack above the bunk to silence a draught. The wind sulks and finds another hole. Lice perform roll call in the seams. You attend with your nails. The boy with the tie learns to tuck bread under his belt and spoon in his boot and look nobody in the eye while doing it. Someone plays bones made from yesterday's bread, clack soft, damp luck. The air smells of boiled cloth, iodine breath, and men trying not to remember oranges. If you're listening from a room with double glazing, rate the silence. Here the quiet has splinters. Dawn hands you a broom and calls it a pick. The sky has forgotten blue, it serves pewter, scraped thin. The lineup tastes of iron filings and cabbage ghosts. Breath gathers low and grey around knees, a cloud with opinions. The board says accelerated norm bridge bed kilometre 143. Neat numbers that will be paid in backs. The brigadier's pencil is already coughing. It scratches your life into 6 boxes and taps the last as if that were mercy. Lucia inspects faces the way a cat inspects chairs and chooses your Lee again with the elegance of theft. He calls you poet like it's a punishment that could be worse. Gennady mutters about grain and knots because the words keep his lips moving, and moving keeps them attached. Your scarf has decided to be armour. You bite it to break the stiffness and get the coin taste rich in nothing. If you're watching from a warm bus, congratulations on luxury public transport. Out here, the only bus is a sled, and the route always returns to the same stop. The bridge bed is a pit of stubborn stone crusted in hoarfrost. You light fires that pee resin and cat stink, and the ground sweats a black breath that steams into your sleeves and sets there, grudging jewellery. Pick, hip, shoulder, elbow. The rhythm knocks at your wrists until the bones answer in their thin metal voices. Steam needles your eyelashes to white combs. You blink grit that tastes like old teeth. A truck backs until its tyres cry. Men set rollers, curse impatient syllables that feel carved rather than spoken. The rope over your shoulder files a groove in the coat and finds the pad beneath and writes its name there, slow and proprietary. Your toes argue with existence. The Feldscher's grease turns waxy and then irrelevant. The brigadier counts in hasty piles. His numbers collapse and he stacks them again with the stubbornness of a carpenter building a door for weather to disapprove of. By late morning, the wind changes politics, arriving from the river with knives honed on distance. The sledge bogs at the lip where old ice has made up its mind to be water again. You step into slush that introduces itself as a relative and takes your breath for collateral. Cold climbs your shin like disciplined ants. The smell is iron, rotten leaf, and something quiet. Gennady wedges Birch under the runner and says now, like a man setting a joint. You lean until the harness sings and the rope answers with a low, sawing hum that crawls through wool and into teeth. The sledge lifts, shifts, sulks forward, and your calf cramps so cleanly you want to applaud the craftsmanship. A guard with red ears compliments your vigour. You thank him with a nod because language here is expensive and salt is cheap only when it's in the road. You pour a small curse into your mitten to keep your hand warm. Break his balander with a plan to be heat. You cradle the tin until your fingers understand the concept and then you dare a sip. Tongue burns at the rim, teeth complain in the middle. Air steals the idea before you can own it. The new Etap boy with the tie still intact has learned to untie it and loop it around his waist under the shirt, a useless belt with a memory. He eats fast but not rude, as if manners might keep him here longer. Plyusha drifts near and offers the lee for a story about city stairs. He listens, genuinely amused, then taxes the amusement with a cigarette butt and a spoon's width of kasha he didn't carry. You let it happen because the alternative is a lesson where your ribs do the reading. The brigadier pretends fairness, and the pencil pretends ink is food. Everyone participates, grateful for theatre that doesn't require costumes. Afternoon, the road becomes a mouth that wants gravel teeth. You pry boulders that smell of old rain and iron into motion and walk them with bars, your breath wheezing like an accordion left out in weather. Resin smoke clings to your throat. The taste is cat and Christmas and a sawdust sweetness that mocks the word. The axe handle slicks with a brown varnish of old sweat and plant spit. A museum you carry in your glove. The sky leans closer, lidding the cut, and snow starts its small mean sideways. Grains like insults, careful and frequent. Plyusha laughs at nothing in particular, and it steams. He tows the sledge with 2 urki while you set rollers, and for a minute labour almost resembles choreography, petty and precise. A truck finally climbs free of the rut, bellies over the crown, and coughs a diesel breath so sweet your tongue believes in ovens again. The belief passes. The road, however, stays. Back in the yard, the punishment box exhales a quiet ribbon of frost. Someone coughs inside and the door jamb withers. Blooms again with each breath, a slow grey flower. Gate search is bored and familiar. Belt slap, hat humoured, pockets yawning their emptiness on command. An urka you don't know relocates a spoon by sleight of hand. You only see because you were once the kind of clerk who noticed missing commas. You decide to be the kind of worker who doesn't. In the mess, the drum speaks in ladle knocks. Stew thins toward the bottom the way conversations do when the warmest thing in the room is obligation. You sit by the stove door and let the iron breathe tar and cabbage into your face. The heat stings and then forgives. Gennady offers a shaving of wood thin as onion skin and tucks it into the crack above the bunk to silence a draft. The wind sulks and finds a new sentence to edit. If you are hearing this on headphones, rate the hiss. Ours is stove, pipe, fabric, men. 1 note long and never quite in tune. Night has its own shift and you pull it whether or not someone signed your name. The sky turns from pewter to shale and then to nothing. Wind shakes the barracks as if testing studs. A guard announces snow maintenance, which means shoveling drifts off roofs so the roofs remember they are roofs. You climb a ladder that crunches under your boots like stale rye. Rungs bite through felt and the ache writes letters up your shin bone. Snow is light until it isn't. It slumps, compacts, pretends to be a feather bed until it decides to be concrete. You push with a shovel worn thin. The handle keeps the varnish of 100 palms sour and sticky. Your breath fogs the scarf and turns it to armour. Your cheeks burn, then go numb, then come back mean. A slide lets go and you ride it on your heels. Knees bent, back screaming polite threats. You land in a pile that smells of clean cold and tar. Gennady laughs once, a wooden sound, and says roofs are like men. They cave when they forget how to shed. You file that as wisdom because it hurts less than the fall. Inside, the bathhouse is a rumour of heat trapped in wet wood. The air tastes of lye and singed hair. Benches sweat and the floor is a map of footprints thawing toward nothing. You barter 2 stitches and half a story for 3 ladles of hot water and 1 minute in the steam. It carves the ice from your moustache, floods your chest with breath that doesn't cut and then leaves, offended by the draft in your towel. Men laugh quietly at their own knees. The sound is relief with splinters. A sliver of brown soap makes a rash of bubbles that smell like old pennies and pine. It slides over ribs that count themselves. Lice lift in the heat, drunk and careless. You pinch what you can and salute the rest. On the way out you touch the doorpost. Iron warm for once, and the palm print shines and fades in the damp like a small disbelieving miracle. Mail call is theatre for people who can't afford tickets. A clerk in a coat that fits better than his conscience reads names with the relish of a butcher reciting cuts. Most of the audience studies the floorboards because hope is expensive. A postcard finds the Etap boy with the vanished tie. Printed roses. A corner smudged with a city that had bread lines and light. He doesn't open it right away. He warms it under his shirt like a small stove. Yours doesn't come. Again. So you borrow other people's paper with your eyes, the colour of ink, slant of hand, a stamp that smells faintly of glue and room air. The guard censors with a nail, scraping adjectives to keep the nouns obedient. Shavings fall like snow. You remember being a clerk and hate the memory for knowing where to look for grief. When the boy finally reads, his lips move, and steam writes his words into the rafter for a second before the wind edits them out. Next day the quota rises without ceremony, the way rivers do when you're not watching the upstream thaw. The board wears new numerals that look reasonable to someone whose gloves are warm. Bridge cribbing, cut, haul, tamp. The axe handle vibrates with opinions, each strike spits resin against your wrist, and Cat and Christmas lifts into your nose until the wind edits it out. You tamp gravel with a maul that pretends to be a stamp. Each thud shudders your knees and sends grit up your trousers to live there. Salt goes down to cure the road. It stings cuts you forgot to respect. The Feldsher says movement is treatment and hands you grease that smells like lamp meat. You nod and keep swinging. The Gold Road doesn't know your name, only your volume. It swallows stone and keeps asking for more, polite as a file, hungry as a ledger. The Aurora shows up like a drunken spectre. Late, loud and beautiful in the wrong place. Green veils drag across the ridge. For a minute the snow glows bottle glass and your shadow has opinions. The wind keeps its job. Cold saws your ear until the felts ring. Blyusha watches the sky and smirks, as if colour owed him rent. He says the lights are souls escaping. Gennady says they're just sun scraps. You say nothing because your mouth is busy negotiating tin-flavoured air. The guards pretend not to notice in case noticing is against regulations. You blow steam into your mitten and smell tar, wool, and a sweetness you can't name that vanishes as soon as it appears. The sky folds its trick away and the dark returns to bookkeeping. That night a search turns serious. A knife has gone missing from the kitchen, which is to say it has achieved freedom. Everyone lines in socks on the icy boards, while a guard with a notebook and a temper pat souls through souls. Breath rises and clots under the rafters. The stove is ordered to behave and therefore doesn't. The Urki perform innocence like professionals. You perform boredom and count your heartbeats, because numbers make good alibis. The missing knife is discovered in the ash bucket, exactly where anyone with half a memory would have left it. The culprit is punished by work that already had his name on it. You're punished by watching. When the door finally shuts, the cold retreats an inch, and you feel every inch like a coin you didn't earn. Morning after the knife hunt arrives with a delicate touch of a boot. The door swings, the cold walks in like it pays rent, and your bones remember inventory. Straw trades your heat back to you at pawn shop rates. The smell is mouse, wet wood, and a salt that never came from the sea. The Brigadier posts new arithmetic with a smile that looks stapled on. Snow fences, kilometre 145. Prevent drift, preserve roadway. You're handed a saw that sticks on first bite, teeth clogged with yesterday, and a coil of wire that smells of rust and river. Blyusha inspects the line like a tailor, plucks the lee for his boys and tosses you a wink worth nothing. The scarf refuses to bend until you crack the coins out of it with your teeth. Copper and wool, iron on the tongue. If you're watching from a train, rate the upholstery. Our seats are pine ribs and the chatter is wind. Brush cutting tastes of resin. Cat. and a sweetness that would be pleasant if it weren't glued to your lungs. The saw grabs and lets go with a cough. Each stroke drags a thin squeal through your wrists. Birch gives a papery sigh and leans into your shoulder. You step aside and it kisses the crust, a soft thump that throws powder into your boots. You bundle faggots until the twine bites, then drag them to posts half buried in spite. The wire sings a faint, mean music when you twist it tight. Snow stings your cheeks like a barber in a hurry. Gennady works silent and exact, lining sticks the way a joiner lays laths. His breath rims his moustache in hoar and shines there, a carpenter's crown. The wind studies your fence and laughs, but it will settle for now. Nothing here wins, but sometimes a thing declines to lose quickly. At noon the etap boy, tie now a belt under his shirt, dignity demoted, gets a nosebleed that paints the snow a polite pink. The Feldshire presses a wad that smells like iodine and lamp fat, and tells him not to be dramatic. The boy tries to apologise to his own blood and coughs instead. You offer half a biscuit of salt that once lived in someone else's pocket. He sucks it, and the taste makes his eyes water in a new language. His hands shake around the tin. The heat is a small animal that keeps trying to escape between his fingers. Blucher appears, taxes the moment with a joke about roses on postcards, and pockets a cigarette butt like it's a coin from a country that still believes in coins. The wind plays your fence, a low harp, and the note is endurance. You eat fast because the air steals minutes the way clerks steal afternoons. Afternoon brings rumour and a crate of powder like dull bread. No heroics, just shallow pops to persuade a stubborn seam. A guard with red ears recites safety in a voice that proves he's heard of it. The cap reeks of sulphur and dust, and the fuse is a sly, furry snake that wants to be your friend. You tamp charges in thawed holes that smell of wet iron and old leaves. Your gloves pick up grit and tar until they feel like new species. When the wick hisses, you step back to the measured count of a man who understands both carpentry and regret. The earth jumps small, offended. Frozen clods thump your coat and leave dark kisses that stiffen to ice before you can brush them off. The blast is less sound than pressure, a hand on your chest that never learned gentle. You cough, taste eggs and metal and think, paperwork for the sky. Back in the yard, the mess venue offers tonight's production. Barley, theory, and steam. The ladle knocks the drum like a town crier with bad news. You hold the tin until your palms ache and the ache becomes heat and the heat becomes permission. The stew is a brown argument that you win by chewing. Gennady shows you a trick with a sardine tin. Cut, fold, tack, an insole patch that lies to the snow just long enough to matter. The tin smells of salt ghosts and oil, it warms to your foot and then forgets you, which is also a kind of mercy. The etap boy reads his postcard by the stove, lips moving. He turns it over twice as if warmer words might be on the back. The guard pretends not to see anyone's eyes. Blucher trades someone's spoon for a smile and the smile for a place by the draught that isn't. Commerce as weather. You tuck your bread under your belt and your spoon in your boot and call it wealth. Night edits faces down to breath and teeth. The stove's iron belly exhales cabbage and tar. The pipe ticks as if it kept time for a band that never plays. Lice patrol the seam lines with bureaucratic zeal. Your nails file appeals on both flanks. Outside, the chain worries its own grammar. Link paws link, and the watchlight sweeps the yard in a tired parabola that smells like kerosene and boredom. Gennady talks in his sleep, planing boards smoother in a language made of shavings. Every so often his hand twitches a joint true. You slide the tin patch inside the boot and it whispers against wool like foil at a festival you didn't attend. If you're hearing this under a real roof, rate the silence. Ours comes with splinters, rafter drip, and a draft that insists it is a relative. You sleep because your body files the form in triplicate and stamps it approved. The rest is weather. Morning stands outside the door, tapping its boot like a supervisor. The whistle slices the barracks, steam hangs low and grey, wool sour and fish-tinged, and you press your mouth to the scarf until the coin taste breaks. The board says, ditch clearance, kilometre 146, keep drainage. A sentence that sounds like help until you remember water hates cages. The saw-teeth chatter in brush gone stone hard. Resin breath cuts sweet then bitter. Your fingers go blind in the mittens. You work by memory of pressure. Heel, palm, thumb, because eyes are for making mistakes at distance. The shovel lip rings when it finds ice. The note is thin and mean. A chain hums somewhere off, writing small weather in the yard. Your breath frosts the scarf again and sets. You crack it with your teeth and taste iron. The wind moves sideways at knee height, hunting socks. The guard with red ears does a little dance to keep them, and the dance smells like cheap tobacco and wool that remembers rain. Ditchwork eats shovels, steel bites brittle crust, slides, then jams in black slush that smells of moss and old metal. Leverage tugs your spine like a bad handshake. You heave, boot planted, and the sole skates. Wet cold climbs leather and negotiates with your toes in a language that feels like pins. The guard with red ears lectures gravity to no effect. He stamps and smokes, and the tobacco smells like the inside of a mitten left on a stove. Ice plates fracture into china clinks that make everyone look richer than they are. Gennady shows you a trick with a pry bar and a wedge of brush. The culvert of small mercies, and the muck grudgingly surrenders an inch. When your glove slips, the handle varnish, tar, sweat, time, greases your palm, and the cold steps in, polite as a clerk, to take notes. You breathe through cloth that tastes like pennies and old tea. At break, the soup pretends heat against the tin and succeeds only at the rim. Your tongue burns, your teeth chill, your breath steals the rest. The tap boy, tie reborn as belt, collar scuffed to felt, counts, sips, eyes on steam as if reading a letter. You slide him your last 2 salt grains. They pop on his tongue and his face folds into something almost private. He nods once like a man admitting a board is straight. Plyusha arrives late and taxes the Lee with a story about Odessa oranges that spray sunlight. He charges admission in cigarette ends and opinions. The story warms exactly the distance between his teeth and none of the air. The wind fingers the poster about voluntary obligations until the corners curl. The ink smells of minerals and make-believe. You tuck your spoon away under your belt and lick the tin like a man who respects dishware. Afternoon graduates you to culverts, barrels set mouth to mouth in a ditch of stubborn water. The staves sweat under your gloves. Cold climbs through wool like slow electricity, and the hoops rasp metal on ice, a dry music that files your patience. You tamp gravel with a maul that hates rhythm and loves knees. Each strike thuds back up your legs and shakes grit into your socks. The culvert mouths align with a click you feel in your palms. Gennady nods once, satisfied, then wedges brush to keep the slope from thinking about quitting. Steam from thaw licks your wrists and then betrays you, freezing in the same breath. The skin there shines pink and insulted. A truck backs until its tyres cry. Men lay rollers slick with hoarfrost, and your breath sings at a pitch that pretends to be laughter. The air tastes of resin, cat, and a faint sweetness you don't trust. By late light, the wind sharpens and begins to write small, mean sentences along the snow. You shovel slush into a hiss of tin that chills before you can call it work. Your mitten, patched with fishbone stitches, soaks and then calcifies. The brigadier's pencil flutters like a bird with poor circulation. Numbers appear that comfort nobody and feed exactly 1 pot. Plyusha leans in to borrow your shadow from the wind and returns it dented. His chain whispers like a prayer with grammar mistakes. He compliments your shovel stroke as if grading furniture and pockets a smell of your lunch that wasn't there. Gennady measures the ditch line with a joiner's eye and says, "Good enough to drain a priest," which earns half a grin from the guard who never laughs whole. You taste iron and old smoke. Your breath turns to lace and then to nothing. Back in the yard, search becomes a ritual you could do in someone else's sleep. Belt slap, hat check, pockets turned until their corners show the day's lint. Coal grit, bread crumbs, a wire twist with plans. The punishment box exhales a pale ribbon. Frost flowers on the jam bloom and die with each cough inside. In the mess, barley plays at generosity and loses. You chew like a carpenter driving a stubborn nail, and the nail argues its case in your molars. The ladle knocks the drum in a steady sermon. Steam rises with cabbage and tar, and paints the rafters darker. The etap boy warms his tin with both hands and stares at the postcard again, as if heat might develop hidden words. Gennady shows you how to cut a sardine tin into a heel plate. The metal smells of oil ghosts and warms under breath. If you're listening in a kitchen that has real salt, rate its honesty. Ours stings only when the road orders it. Night is grey, not black, a ceiling of breath that sweats and then snows back onto faces. Lice work the seams with union discipline. Your nails file grievances in the dark and win small cases with blood under the verdict. The roof ticks as ice renegotiates with timber. The stove mutters like a tired foreman whose orders only impress the nearest board. You curl around the spoon and heel as if they were a stove of their own. The warmth is petty and loyal. Somewhere the chain moves one link and then thinks better of it. The sound climbs the boards and sits on your chest until you breathe it off. You tuck your scarf under your ear to quiet the draft. The wool smells like coins and men. Sleep comes like a clerk who knows your file by weight and stamps it without reading. Sometime past lights out, the wind shoulders the door, and a voice orders snow detail outer gate. You stand into boots that remember you only after argument, and the night takes your breath like collateral. The yard stinks of tar, old ash, and metal cooling. The stars feel sharpened. You hitch your rope to a sledge and lean with 5 others until the runners croak. The stuck truck on the crown coughs diesel that paints warmth on your tongue, a lie you accept. Snow pellets sting your cheeks like sand and melt into the scarf, then freeze in place. Your eyelashes click when you blink. The rope saws a new line through your coat padding and writes its name there in slow fire. When the truck belly crests and slithers down, a cheer tries to form and fails. What comes out is breath and steam. You coil the rope with fingers you can't feel and walk back into the barracks, heat like a thief returning stolen minutes. Morning lines up like accounts due. Steam pools knee-high, grey and fish sour, and the brigadier nails new arithmetic to the post with mittens that squeak. Inspection today, he says, which means the same work with shinier lies. A rumour clinks down the row, man from Dalstroy, clipboard, boots that never learn snow. You crack your scarf with your teeth and the coin taste walks into your mouth like a landlord. The guard with red ears polishes his bayonet on wool that smells of old tobacco, and a poster about shock workers acquires a fresh crease you don't remember seeing yesterday. Plyusha takes 2 steps of your lee as tribute and calls it rent. His chain whispers punctuation at your ribs. The sky is pewter, the kind that bends but never breaks. If you're listening from an office where the radiator hisses like snakes, rate the warmth. Ours hisses too, and then it freezes into lace on the rafters. They set you on gabions, wire baskets for rock, because a washout chewed the road's lip and swallowed a horse last week without sending condolences. The wire smells of rust and river. It saws your mitten in a polite, persistent way, leaving a damp sting that will be ice before you remember to mind it. You bend loops with pliers that keep other men's sweat in their joints. Tar, iron, sour wool, a museum that won't close. Gennady measures stones by eye, fits them like dovetails, mutters about bite and drift. The basket drinks rock until it bulges like a lyre. Your breath sharpens in your throat and salts the scarf. The wool goes rigid and scratches your lip. Fire-thaw sighs at your ankles. Cat, Christmas, and the quiet of wet iron, then quits just when your fingers remember heat. The brigadier counts in neat stacks that don't survive the next gust. He stacks again, stubborn as fence posts in wind. Noon brings theatre. The inspector arrives in a truck that coughs perfume, diesel and an idea of leather, and steps down into a snow that thinks about disliking him. The clipboard smells faintly of glue and a room with curtains. He praises quotas in the tone of a man who loves punctuation like bread. He underlines a number with a glove, and the glove frosts as he does it. You stand in a row, breathing tar cabbage steam from the drum and pretending stew is applause. A guard hides a bottle under his coat, the amber grin of warmth, and Plyusha's chain ticks once as the bottle changes owners by magic and returns half lighter. The inspector tastes tea like a man kissing his own signature. The cup fogs his moustache, which is a small republic of its own. He declares this stretch exemplary and tells the pencil to write it down. The pencil obeys. The road eats rock and stays hungry. By mid-afternoon the light loses patience and a whiteout walks in without knocking. The world shrinks to rope and breath. Posts ghost up from the drift with rhyme beards, and the fence wire sings a thin, mean note. You tie yourself to Gennady with a loop that smells of fish string and panic. The knot bites your glove through the patch and licks your wrist with cold. The wind lifts snow sideways at shin height, grainy and deliberate, and it stings like a barber with a grievance. The brigadier's shouts are paper torn by hand. You follow the rope because sentences make better paths than guesses. The etap boy with the postcard stumbles into a hollow and doesn't answer the first call. You find him by the sound of breath failing to be breath and hall. with a grunt that tastes of tin. His face glossy pale, lashes white combs. You slap heat back into his cheeks with a mitten that smells of lamp fat, and he blinks like a door learning hinge. The mess serves an inspection ration. Barley thicker by rumour, a film of grease you can chase around the tin and trap with bread. Sugar appears, a few hard crystals that click against your teeth like harmless bullets, and men look at each other as if light had been issued. You let one melt under your tongue slow, stubborn as pride. It tastes of nothing and then of everything. Days where oranges were not a story tax. Plyusha taxes your sugar with a gaze, and you pay him in a story about stairs you once climbed 2 at a time. He pockets the picture and lets the crystal stay. Gennady unrolls a new trick. A clamp cut from sardine tin, crimped and hammered with a spoon, its edges oiled and smelling of salt ghosts. He fastens it over your boot crack until the leather decides to pretend. The drum knocks. The room breathes tar and cabbage, and somebody laughs with their teeth closed to save heat. Night doesn't fall so much as settle its coat across everything. The stove's iron belly exhales, stingy and tar-sweet. The pipe ticks like a metronome set to endurance. Lice patrol the seams with bureaucratic zeal. Your nails write their own petitions and win small, bloody verdicts. The inspector's praise already feels like a rumour someone told for warmth. The ETAP boy sleeps with the postcard under his shirt like a stove the size of a hand. His breath fogs and drips from the bunk slat above in a slow, sarcastic rain. Outside, a chain drags one link and a dog edits the night with a single bark thin as wire. You tuck spoon in boot, bread under belt, scarf over ear, and the straw crackles like dry insects counting. If you're watching from a room where tomorrow means breakfast and not arithmetic, rate the promise. Here tomorrow is a board with new numbers, a rope across a white mouth, and a wind that files its own reports. Morning gives you a list before it gives you light. The board reads, Corduroy kilometre 147, lay, spike, tamp, which means trees become road and men become nails. The sawbuck creaks and the blade coughs resin that smells like cat and Christmas. Each pull rasps your wrists, a thin music filed into bone. You and Gennady shoulder a log slick with hoarfrost. Bark grates your neck through the coat and prints lines that sting, honest and small. The adze bites chips from knots that look like eyes. Yellow sap beads and runs, sweet on the air and mean on the skin. Your breath salts the scarf and turns it to coins. You bite them loose and taste iron. Snow squeaks under boots with that rubbed glass protest that always sounds personal. The guard with red ears stamps time and smokes a cigarette that smells like luck you won't get to try. You square the first run across mud locked under glass and tamp it with a maul that tells your knees its opinions. The log drinks your heat slowly, stingy as a landlord. Your shoulders throb in a ledger handwriting only you can read. Wire staples bite through mitten and leave a sting that will become philosophy by evening. Gennady checks spacing like he checks dovetails, muttering about drift and bite, and the line begins to look like a sentence that might hold. A truck noses close and breathes diesel sweet as a lie. Steam from the thaw licks your wrists and then betrays you, freezing hard. The rope across your shoulder files a groove in the coat and finds the pad beneath and begins writing its name there, slow and permanent. The wind shops for your warmth and pays with grit. Break is a page torn from the same book, Belanda thin enough to read through, bread that remembers flour as an anecdote. Steam beads on your lashes and clicks when you blink. The tin burns your tongue at the rim and chills it in the belly. The ETAP boy rehearses a poem under breath and forgets the last line. He smiles like someone warming hands over a stove that isn't there. You pass him 2 salt grains, they crackle, and his eyes water for reasons he won't confess. Plyusha taxes your wind shadow with a story about oranges spraying sunlight. Admission is a cigarette butt, and the smell of your soup. The poster about voluntary obligations curls at the corners like a plant tired of pretending. You tuck your spoon under your belt, swallow the metal taste, and go back to the part of the day that believes in verbs. Back to it. Lay, spike, tamp, curse, breathe, repeat until the verbs blur into one long noise. The adze handle has learned your palm. Its varnish is other men's days, sour and sticky. Sap spatters your sleeve and dries into glass that scratches when you move. You seat a log into the bed and a wedge slips. The head kisses your knuckle and a white flash knocks the air from your mouth. Clean pane, thin as ice, arrogant as a clerk. Gennady wraps the split in a rag that smells of lamp fat and old fish, and tells you to swing from the hip, not from pride. Snow begins its small mean sideways and collects in the seam of your hat, melting just long enough to travel cold down your neck. You keep the line straight because the road punishes crooked like a religion. Toward evening, hauling duty turns human again. The punishment box exhales a ribbon of frost that blooms and withers. Inside, a cough forgets how to be regular. You and 2 others slide the sled to the wall where shadows stack. The weight is not shocking, only decisive. Clothes crackle like paper. The smell is iron, tallow, cooled breath. You lay him under boards that remember other backs and the Feldshire signs with a stub of pencil that smells of iodine and smoke. After, you stack cordwood because wood does not require you to explain. In the mess, the stove coughs into life, tar sweet and cabbage thick. The ladle knocks and the drum answers. Your portion is warm at the rim and theory in the middle. You chew anyway because hunger has tenure. Night approves no one. The barracks fills with wool breath and small arguments. The roof ticks and the pipe counts a slow, petty rhythm. Lice patrol the seams with union zeal and you file complaints with your nails, winning verdicts that itch and bleed a little and then forget you. Blucher dreams with his grin on. The attack boy sleeps with the postcard under his shirt, a stove the size of a hand. Outside, the chain drags one link and then thinks better. The wind practices handwriting against the wall. You hide bread under your belt and spoon in your boot and call it savings. If you're listening from a room with quiet walls, rate the silence. Ours sheds splinters. Sometime after lights out, a boot writes its opinion on the door, and the guard with red ears orders tool check. Picks line the aisle like tired dogs, and everyone remembers which lies belong to which handles. He finds a nail filed into a hook in someone's boot heel, and recites a paragraph about honesty that smells like tobacco and boredom. The culprit is assigned a snow trench no one needs. The rest of you are assigned to watch, which is how punishment multiplies. Gennady quietly brews pine needle tea in a sardine tin over a coal that pretends not to glow. The steam smells like attic and cat and a sweetness with opinions. You sip from the edge, taste rust and forest and something like patience. Your hands warm around the tin just enough to believe in morning again, which is a small disloyal relief. End-of-month storming shows its teeth before the sky shows colour. The board blooms with new numerals and cheerful verbs, and the brigadier's pencil clicks like a metronome set to someone else's heartbeat. Shtumovka, he says, as if the word were a blanket and not a whip, and the poster about records multiplies itself on the post like frost. You crack the coins out of your scarf with your teeth and taste iron and old wool. Steam hangs low with a cabbage and tar mood that doesn't forgive. Blucher steps into your lee and collects rent in the currency of silence. His chain breathes punctuation against your ribs, while he calls you poet like a verdict that keeps its hands clean. The guard with red ears rubs them until they shine, then hands you a pick that leans left, a rope that smells of salt ghosts, and a promise that the plan will love you if you lift faster. If you're watching this at lunch, rate the bread. Ours is a rumour that believes in itself exactly as long as your teeth. The cut wants gravel by the cart and respect by the bruise. You light brush that peas, resin and cat. Thor hisses a black breath that climbs your sleeves and then deserts you, freezing where it lands as jewellery with bad manners. Caps bite with dull obedience. The fuse whispers fur against your glove, a shy snake you don't trust but must befriend, and sulphur paints the inside of your nose in a yellow you can taste. The charge pops like a door slapped by weather. The permafrost jumps, offended, and then remembers it is a career. Clods thump your coat and stiffen to shells before you brush them. Grit finds your teeth and writes a dry, sandy sentence behind your eyes. A misfire spits late and the guard swears in 2 dialects. You duck, bang your knuckle, see a sheet of clean white in your skull, then breathe again and taste iron, diesel, and boiled air. The rope hums through your mitten like a bow on gut. You lean until your calves issue small bureaucratic protests in a font that never runs out of ink. Belander arrives as arithmetic, hot at the lip and cold in the middle. You cradle the tin until the ache becomes heat and the heat becomes a theory you can sip. The Attack boy's gums shine blood bright where teeth used to trust. The Feldshire salts him with pine needle tea that smells like attic and hope, and hands him grease with the bedside manner of a carpenter. Gennady slices a bark curl from a scrap and tells you it's spring in a language he once used to plane doors. You chew the joke carefully because chewing is work. Plyusha taxes the table with a philosophy about law that counts only to two, have and not have, and pockets a cigarette butt that smells of someone else's good day. Sugar is rumour, salt is policy. Your spoon clinks against the tin like a small promise keeping time. The steam paints your face and then forgets you. The scarf takes it and turns it into coins again. You swallow the taste of old pennies and pretend it's lunch. Evening brings culture in a coat that smells of lye and kerosene. A politruk with a pravda that crackles. A poem about production that rhymes with obedience. A chart pinned to a wall that sweats. You stand in a room that exhales tar and cabbage, while words march neatly across a page that never met weather. The inspector's cousin in your mind underlines a number, and your stomach misreads it as calories. Men cough in polite alternation. A laugh starts and doesn't finish. The stove hiccups a coal that glows like gossip and dies before it can be believed. The Urki perform piety with hands that forget to unclench. Plyusha smiles at the correct moments like a man tipping his hat to a mirror he plans to sell. You clap with mittens that smell of fish fat and iron. The sound is wool hitting wood, soft and stubborn. If you're watching this under a lamp with a switch that obeys, rate the luxury. Our switch is night, and it flips itself whenever it wants. Next day the surveyor appears like a priest with a brass sacrament, a frozen theodolite, an attitude, and a rod that hums in your mittens when the wind plays it. You plant your boots in a squeak that sounds like rubbed glass and hold the pole upright while the sky practices being lid-coloured. Breath salts your scarf to armour, and you break it again with your teeth until copper floods your tongue. The man mutters angles that pretend to be roads, and you wobble in slow ellipses the wind writes around your knees. Gennady taps the stake and says true like a joiner. The head drops into frost with a small decisive thud, and the ground accepts the syllable. The surveyor's ink smells like rooms. The page stiffens and curls at the corner where the air argues. Your toes argue too. Dull pins filing notes. The tin heel plate warms just enough to lie to you, and you accept the lie because it gets the rod through one more reading. The aurora threatens green at the rim and then thinks better. The shift ends the way grain ends under a plane. Curled, thin, leaving a surface that looks honest because you want it to. Gate search is bored and intimate. Pockets yawn, belts slap, hats confess only sweat salt and the runway lice built. The punishment box exhales a ribbon of breath that blooms and withers. Someone coughs inside and the frost flowers keep time. In the mess the drum talks in ladle knocks while barley pretends to be generous. Your tin burns at the rim and chills at the belly, and you drink both truths one after the other. Gennady tucks a shaving into a crack above the bunk, and the draft sulks its way into a new sentence. Plyusha dreams with a grin that shows old bites. The Etap boy sleeps with the postcard under his shirt like a hand-sized stove. Outside, the chain moves a single link and reconsiders. If you're in a room where the radiator sighs and stays warm, rate the sound. Here the wind writes our names and then files us under back tomorrow. Morning files in with its hat off and a list in its mouth. Borrowed men to quarry, kilometre 148. Caps, sledges, corduroy approach. The brigadier taps the board until numbers pretend to behave. His pencil squeaks like a mouse trapped under glass. Your scarf has rehardened into a wallet of coins you have to bite open. Copper and wool, the taste of small debts. Out on the path the wind has been up early, arranging the drifts by height, a tidy clerk. It grades your shins with sand like snow and rubs your cheeks raw enough to sign. Boards underfoot squeal like violins tuned by people who dislike music. The guard with red ears hands out picks that lean left or right depending on their politics, and tells you the plan loves enthusiasm. Plyusha strolls along the line collecting rent in lee space, chain whispering punctuation. He calls you poet as if the word could be a bruise you won't see until later. You shoulder the rope that smells of salt ghosts and old fish and taste iron as the scarf coins break against your teeth. At the quarry cut, Fire-thaw starts low and sour, brush that spits cat and Christmas, then graduates to small sulking caps tamped into permafrost that sweats black before it remembers its career. The fuse whispers against your glove like a tame furry snake that would prefer a warmer handler. Pop, pop, a polite argument. Clods hop, thump your coat and freeze there, as if they were always part of you. Steam beads your lashes and turns to grit. You blink sand and hear the pick sing thin coin when iron kisses stone. The brigadier counts volume in piles that keep changing their minds, and pencils a truth warm enough to feed one pot. Urki angle themselves into the wind shadow as if it were property. You angle out again and remember the tariff. Your breath saws in your throat like a dull blade. Resin smoke licks your tongue and leaves a sweetness you can't trust. Noon arrives thin and punctual. Belander impersonates heat at the rim and forgets in the middle. Your tongue burns, your teeth chill, and your breath steals the difference. The Etap boy with the postcard has learned to eat with his shoulders hunched as if wind could reach soup. His knuckles shine red and glassy around the tin. You tip him 2 salt grains, they crackle, and his eyes water like a thaw that won't commit. Blusha drifts by, taxes everyone's shadow with a story about oranges, and pockets a cigarette butt the size of a thumbnail like a coin. The Feldscher passes, smells of iodine and lamp fat, and tells the boy to move or freeze according to the law of feet. A gull, insane and inland, saws the air once. The wind pockets the sound and denies the evidence. You drink fast so the air doesn't steal minutes. The tin leaves a stripe of heat on your palms that argues for work. Afternoon is corduroy approach. Logs dragged from the scrub and married to mud that has chosen to be stone. The adze bites sweet, then mean. Sap spatters and dries into glass freckles on your sleeve that scratch when you lift. Wire staples chew your mitten in a slow, persuasive way. You answer with lamp fat grease that smells of fish and old church, and pretend philosophy helps. A truck bogs to its belly and coughs diesel the colour of a remembered kitchen. Men set rollers glazed with hoarfrost, and the rope talks through your shoulder in a low, sawing voice that travels into teeth. Your calf cramps with the tidy satisfaction of a clerk stamping no across a form. Gennady says now, and the load slides, sulks and moves. Steam climbs your sleeves and then betrays you, freezing where it lands. The seam burns cold and writes its name along your ribs. Gate search is the same argument with fresh gloves. Belts slap, hats confess sweat salt and lice runways, pockets yawn their emptiness like bored mouths. The punishment box exhales a ribbon of frost that blooms, withers, blooms again. Someone coughs inside and the jam grows flowers in time. In the mess the drum coughs barley, theory and steam. You hold the tin until ache becomes heat and heat becomes permission. Gennady unveils a heel clamp cut from sardine tin, crimped with a spoon and oiled with ghosts of salt. He fastens it over your boot crack until the leather agrees to pretend. The stove breathes tar and cabbage. The air tastes of pennies and boiled cloth. Plyusha wins a spoon by magic and loses it by accident and calls the exchange philosophy. You hide bread under your belt and tuck the spoon in your boot and decide that counts as wealth. Night chews the edges off faces and leaves breath and teeth. The stove's iron belly exhales stingy cabbage and tar. The pipe ticks like a metronome set to resignation. Lice patrol the seam lines like clerks who enjoy their work. Your nails file appeals and win small itchy verdicts you can't spend. Snow shuffles on the roof, rafters sweat and then snow back on you, sarcastic weather that knows your name. Outside, a chain drags one link and then thinks better. A dog writes a single bark on the dark, thin as wire. The guard with red ears smokes under the eave. His cigarette smells like luck filtered through wool. You fold around heel and spoon, press both into belly warmth where pride can't afford rent, and slide into a sleep that stamps itself approved without reading your file. Morning rubs your face with a rope and calls it reveille. The board wears fresh numerals that pretend to be reasonable. Quarry face, kilometre 149. Caps, sledges, corduroy approach, accelerated norm. The brigadier taps the post like a woodpecker with deadlines. His pencil squeaks, then snaps, then keeps writing with its bone. Your scarf has gone to coin again. You crack it with your teeth and taste iron and wool and yesterday. The guard with red ears hands you a pick that leans like a politician, and a rope that smells of salt ghosts. He tells you the plan loves vigour, and you nod because disagreement doesn't warm hands. Plyusha strolls the line collecting rent in lee space, chain whispering its punctuation. He calls you poet like a bruise that will read later. The sky is pewter, the kind that bends but keeps a grudge. If you're hearing this from a place where coffee has a smell and not a rumour, rate the treason. Our coffee is a joke with hot water for timing. At the cut, Thaw starts obedient and then sulks. Brushwood stinks of cat and Christmas. Flame licks the hole in your mitten and leaves your knuckles shiny, then deserts you to wind that files reports on skin. Caps tamped into permafrost hiss a yellow breath you can taste. Pop pop and the ground hops, offended, then settles to its career. Clods slap your coat and freeze where they land, polite new armour. Steam beads your lashes and turns to grit. You blink sand and hear the pick-ring-thin coin on stone. Gennady studies a fissure with a joiner's eye and puts your bar where the rock remembers how to move. It rolls with a tired sigh and finds gravity the way men find work. The rope hums through your mitten like a bow on gut. Your calves issue tidy complaints stamped and initialed. Resin smoke coats your tongue in sweetness you don't trust. Your breath saws your throat like dull teeth. A sledge goes sideways on the crown where ice decided water again. The load slews, the rope jerks, and the Etap boy drops his end and vanishes up to the thigh with a sound like a drink sucked empty. Cold climbs his leg, precise as a clerk, and his mouth opens without breath coming out. You and Gennady plant birch rollers, wedge, lean. The rope talks through your shoulder in a low, sawing voice that travels into your teeth. The runners bite, sulk, then slide. You haul the boy clear by the armpits, and the slush writes its signature down your sleeve to live there. The guard with red ears compliments vigour as if vigour paid rations. You answer with a nod, because language is expensive here. The boy's lashes are white combs. You slap warmth into his cheeks with a mitten that smells of lamp fat and fish ghosts. He blinks like a hinge learning true. You stand him until his feet remember his name. Break arrives like a rumour with steam. Belander plays at heat around the rim and forgets the middle. Your tongue burns, your teeth chill, and your breath steals the difference. The Etap boy counts his sips as if minutes could be archived. You salt his tin with 2 grains that crackle, and his eyes water in a private grammar. Plyusha taxes the lee with a story about Odessa oranges spraying sunlight. He charges admission in cigarette ends and opinions and pockets a smell of your soup that wasn't there. The brigadier pins a fresh miracle. Stakhanovate feats that rhyme with lies, on the post. The corners curl, ink mineral and fantasy. Gennady tears a shaving from a stolen scrap and slips it into the boot seam over your heel plate. The wood smells of attic and patience and makes the draft think twice. You lick the tin because respect for dishware feels like character. Afternoon is sledges and corduroy approach, and a small accident with more noise than blood. A runner catches a buried stump and the load tips, stone and ice and a confession of leverage. You jump bar high and miss gracefully. The handle kisses your shoulder and the pain writes a thin, clean line you almost admire. The sledge barks your shin and the world goes white in a way that isn't snow. You breathe coins through wool until the curtain lifts. Gennady says hip, not hero, and resets the rollers with a surgeon's boredom. The rope hums its complaint and the load surrenders, inching like a bureaucrat changing lines. Steam climbs your sleeves and freezes into glass freckles. The seam burns cold and writes its name along your ribs. A truck coughs diesel that tastes like remembered ovens. Belief flares and dies. You keep moving because the road isn't interested in your opinion. Gate search runs the same liturgy. Belt slap, hat humility, pockets yawning their clean mouths. The punishment box exhales a ribbon of frost. The jam blooms and withers with each cough inside. In the mess, the drum sermon's barley, theory and steam. The ladle knocks a rhythm that promises food and delivers patience. Your tin burns at the lip and chills at the belly. You drink both truths because refusing is a luxury. Gennady unveils an ankle strap cut from sardine tin, crimped with a spoon, edges oiled with salt ghosts. He buckles it over the boot crack until the leather agrees to pretend. Plyusha wins a spoon by magic and loses it by strategy and calls the exchange philosophy, then dreams around a grin that shows old bites. The Etap boy warms his postcard under his shirt like a hand-sized stove. The ink smells of rooms. If you're in a room where a switch obeys your finger, rate the miracle. Ours is night, and it flips itself. Night chews faces down to breath and teeth. The stove's iron belly exhales tar and cabbage, and the pipe ticks like a metronome set to resignation. Lice patrol the seam lines like clerks who love their jobs. Your nails file appeals and win small itchy verdicts. Snow shuffles on the roof and the rafters sweat and then snow, back in a slow, sarcastic weather. The guard with red ears smokes under the eave, and the cigarette smells like luck filtered through wool. A dog writes a single bark on the dark, thin as wire. You fold yourself around spoon and heel like a man protecting 2 coins. Warmth pools petty and loyal under your ribs. Sleep arrives like paperwork signed without reading, stamped, filed and shelved under back tomorrow. And the last thing you taste is iron, and the last thing you hear is chain, and the last thing you own is breath you can't afford to spend. Morning arrives with a list in its teeth and a draft in its pockets. Hall pay gravel to Assair, kilometre 150, escort, no spills. The brigadier taps the board until the numbers behave. His pencil squeaks, then skids, then pretends confidence. Your scarf has minted itself overnight. You bite it open and taste iron and yesterday. The sled is a wooden sentence with commas for knots. Sacks ride it like reluctant verbs, stitched mouths dusty with promise. 2 guards bring rifles that smell of oil and boredom. One has red ears and the other has none worth mentioning. Plyusha strolls the column collecting rent in lee space, chain whispering grammar at your ribs. He calls you poet like a bruise and winks at the bags as if gold dust tipped hats. The wind arrives late and overcompensates, shoving at knees, sanding cheeks, writing its name on every exposed idea. If you're hearing this near a kettle, rate the steam. Ours is breath that forgets to be kind. The road to the assay shack is corduroy and complaint. Runners croak on frozen ruts, and the rope hums through your mitten like bow on gut. Fibres grind, and the sound crawls into your teeth to live. The sacks leak an honest rumour of grit. You pinch seams with lamp-fat fingers until they stick again, salty and stubborn. Diesel from a coughing truck paints warmth on your tongue and then wanders off. Resin smoke from Thor sits lower, cat and Christmas, sweet until it bites. The guard with red ears lectures the horizon about discipline, and you nod because you're not the horizon. The Etat boy keeps pace by hanging his breath on yours. His lashes have gone to white combs again. He says nothing, which is smart because the air taxes verbs at a higher rate than nouns. The sledge bumps a buried knot and your shoulder spits a clean sting that will file its report tonight. Inside the assay hut the air is room air. Ink, glue, wool that once met sun, and it cuts your throat with generosity. A clerk in a proper collar sieves grit with the seriousness of a priest. His fingers smell of paper and dryness. He writes a number that will become wires and quotas in your tomorrow. The pencil is warm in his hand, and you hate it for that alone. A little gold flower licks the edge of the pan like secret butter. The clerk smiles privately and covers it with a sheet that rustles like leaves in a place that knows leaves. The guards relax an inch. You don't. The boy stares at a map on the wall like it might apologise. The rivers are blue and the lines are straight and the room is lying with all its windows. Back outside, the wind bites the soft of your ear, and the hut exhales comfort you're not invited to keep. Midday you draw coal detail. A sled from the pile to the barracks, black bricks that give heat if you bribe them with lungs. The chunks smell of tar, salt ghosts and long arguments. Dust climbs your nose and settles behind the eyes with a grit that narrates everything in a dry voice. Your mittens glaze in an instant. You rub them on your coat and polish a patch that will freeze into armour by evening. Gennady rigs a strap from silver sardine tin and wire, and teaches your shoulder a new lie about leverage. The metal tastes of old oil and faith, and it holds until it doesn't, which is long enough. The stove-tender, petty king of ash appraises you with a poker's scepticism and rations out approval by the shovelful. In return, he accepts a cigarette butt that smells of other men's better minutes. The stove eats and sighs, the pipe ticks, pleased with the tribute. Afternoon sets you to brush felling for windbreak because the last whiteout taught the fence new mistakes. The saw chews resin and coughs sweetness that sticks in your mouth. Sap freckles your sleeves into glass that scratches when you bend. Birch settles with papery sighs. You stack faggots until twine chews your mittens into philosophy. The guard with red ears stamps time and tells you to picture summer. You do, and the picture blows away. Plyusha tax farms the Lee with oranges again and pockets a story you didn't tell. The boy's nose goes red and then politely bleeds. The Feldshire paints iodine and says movement is treatment. Rule of feet, law of survival. You walk him until his breath learns his chest again. Snow begins its small, mean sideways, careful as an accountant. Your cheeks sting, then go numb, then plan to remember later. Gate search is the known liturgy. Belt slap, hat humility, pockets yawning their clean lies. The punishment box exhales a ribbon that blooms and withers on the jam. Someone inside coughs in time with the frost flowers. In the mess, the drum sermon's barley and theory. The ladle bangs its homily until you say amen with your spoon. The stew tastes of pennies, cabbage ghosts, and a fish you hope was once an idea. You chew patience into it until it agrees. Gennady adds another shaving to the crack above the bunk and the draft edits itself. Plyusha wins a spoon and misplaces it on principle. He dreams with a grin that shows a history of teeth. The Etap boy warms his postcard under his shirt. The ink smells of glue in a room where windows aren't an argument. If you're listening from a kitchen with salt that came willingly, rate its honesty. Ours belongs to the road. Night settles hard enough to find bones. The stove's iron belly exhales tar and stingy grace. The pipe ticks as if it kept time for a band that only knows one song. Lice patrol the seam lines like clerks with lanterns. Your nails win small verdicts and spend them immediately on itch. Snow whispers on the roof, then shifts, then remembers weight. A rafter answers with a tired complaint. In the far bunk, someone laughs in his sleep and then apologises to the air. You tuck spoon in boot, bread under belt, scarf over ear. The straw cracks with the dry insect grammar you've learned not to translate. Outside, Chain speaks one link and then reconsiders. You fold around heel and coin warm breath, and let sleep file the form stamped approved. Return to sender at dawn. Morning knocks with the butt of a list. Abutment cribbing kilometre 151, lift, wedge, tamp. The Brigadier taps the board until numbers behave. His pencil squeaks like a mouse trapped under glass. Your scarf has minted itself overnight. You bite it open and taste iron and yesterday. Breath sits low and grey around knees. Wool sour and fish bit. Boards underfoot squeal like violins tuned by people who dislike music. The guard with red ears rubs life into them and issues a rope that smells of salt ghosts and old fish. It prints its claim across your shoulder as if signatures were warm. Plyusha strolls, collecting rent in lease space, chain whispering punctuation at your ribs. He calls you poet like a bruise that will read later. The sky is pewter, the kind that bends but keeps a grudge. If you're hearing this from a room where coffee is a smell and not a rumour, rate the treason. Our coffee is hot water that majors in confidence. At the river span, the air has the sting of iron and clean cold. Your nose hairs frost and the world acquires edges too sharp to own. Gabions gape like hungry mouths, wire baskets that drink rock and pretend to hold back water. Fire-thaw hisses, cat and Christmas, and the permafrost sweats a black breath that climbs your sleeves and then deserts you, freezing where it lands as jewellery with bad manners. The pick rings thin coin on stone. Steam beads your lashes and turns to grit. You blink sand. Gennady sets stones like dovetails, muttering about bite and drift until the basket bulges like a lyre. Wire saws your mitten in a polite, persistent way and leaves a damp sting you'll respect when it becomes ice. The Brigadier counts in piles that collapse each time the wind offers an opinion, then stacks again with the stubborn faith of fence posts. A slab shifts with a tired sigh, and the edge kisses the Etap boy's shin hard enough to make his mouth forget breath. No gore, just the arithmetic of weight speaking out of turn. You plant the bar, hip not hero, and Gennady levers with a carpenter's boredom. The stone sulks back into place a finger's width, and the boy's face learns colour again, glossy pale giving way to red. The guard with red ears compliments vigour as if vigour paid rations. You nod because language is expensive. The Feldsher arrives with iodine breath and lamp fat, wraps the shin in rags that used to be shirts and are now philosophy, and tells the boy the 3 rules: no rubbing, movement, and his opinion outranks rules. The reward for surviving is more work. This is what passes for a joke, and everyone understands the punchline. Break is Belander with ambitions and bread that remembers flour as an anecdote. Steam climbs your face and is stolen by wind. The tin burns your lip at the rim and chills your teeth in the middle, weather inside a bowl. A miracle the size of a thumbnail appears, brick tea grated into the drum, and the smell pretends to be china and then becomes cabbage again. Plyusha taxes the Lee with a story about oranges that sprayed sunlight onto a shirt he hasn't owned in 10 years. Admission is a cigarette butt and the smell of your soup. The Brigadier pins fresh miracles, Stakhanovite feats that rhyme with lies. The corners curl from the cold ink mineral and fantasy. You tuck the spoon under your belt, lick the tin because respect for dishware is a kind of character, and go back to verbs. Afternoon runs sledges from span to stack, runners croaking on corduroy like frogs with opinions. Diesel paints warmth on your tongue and then wanders away. Resin smoke sits lower, sweet until it bites. A cultural brigade appears from Magadan with an accordion and a newsreel projector in a crate that smells of kerosene and somebody else's rooms. Work doesn't stop. Only the promise that if you live through it, you can watch men in other weather-eyed tractors across a sheet hung on the mess wall. The projector warms the ceiling more than the room, and the lamp hums like a bee with paperwork. A guard recites production poetry that rhymes obedience with enthusiasm. Blyusha claps at the right moments like a man tipping his hat to a mirror he expects to sell. Gennady listens with the face of a joiner measuring a warped board. He knows where words split. Night is the screening, which is to say another chore you sit through. Wheat blazes across a sheet, sunshine loud and yellow. In here the light turns tar grey on breath and rafters and smells like kerosene and cabbage. Tractors chew fields you can't feel. Titles praise numbers like saints. A factory whistles lunch and you taste coins. Men laugh once, politely, at a joke about records and then cough in a rhythm that edits the punchline. The accordion wheezes a march. It smells of old sweat and varnish. Fingers squeak on keys as if asking for pardon. When the lamp dies, the room remembers itself. Stove ticking, lice patrol, straw whispering in insect grammar, and the night puts its coat back on. If you're listening from a place where a switch obeys your finger, rate the miracle. Ours is a door that lets the wind choose. Back in the barracks, the stove's iron belly exhales stingy grace. Tar sweet, cabbage thick, and the pipe ticks time for a band that only knows one song. You thaw the scarf and it surrenders the shape of your mouth with a sigh like old paper. Wool smells of coins and men. Gate search earlier was the same liturgy. Belt slap, hat humility, pockets yawning clean lies. The punishment box exhaled a ribbon that bloomed and withered on the jam. Someone inside coughed in time with frost flowers. You hide bread under your belt, spoon in your boot, heel patched with sardine tin that smells faintly of salt ghosts. Your wealth fits under 2 ribs and 1 soul. Outside, chain speaks 1 link, then reconsiders. A dog edits the night with a single bark, thin as wire. Sleep files your form stamped approved back tomorrow. And the last thing you own is breath you can't afford to spend. Morning snips the dark into rags and tosses them on the floorboards. The whistle saws the rest. The board says, slope holding kilometre 152, fascine stakes tamp. A sentence that will be paid in hands. Steam puddles around shins, smelling of herring ghosts and tar. The scarf has minted itself again and you bite it open, coin on the tongue, woolen iron. A guard with red ears reads rules like recipes for hunger, then points at you with a mitten glossed in frost. Blyusha strolls the line, chain-breathing punctuation at ribs, and collects rent in lee space like a man charging admission to air. He calls you poet as if the word could bruise later. The sky is pewter with a grudge. If you're hearing this from a kitchen where a kettle behaves, rate the steam. Ours is breath that forgets to be kind. Out at the cut brush is stunted and resin sour. You saw it into fist-thick lengths that sweat sap and cough cat and Christmas into your scarf. Twine bites polite grooves in your mitten as you bundle the sticks into fascines. Each knot saws a philosophy into your palm that will become ice by afternoon. Stakes ring thin when the maul finds them. The sound climbs bone and sets up shop behind your teeth, a dry tenant. Fire-thaw hisses damply at the ditch lip, and steam pearls your lashes before freezing into grit. You blink sand and keep binding. Gennady sets spacing like laths, muttering about drift and bite. The basket of brush drinks the slope and looks briefly convinced. The brigadier counts in piles, the wind edits. He stacks again with fence post faith and pencil squeaks that pretend to be music. Mid-morning a chain throws a tantrum and snaps a glove from a man's hand. Navvy fingernails shining sudden and fox red. He reaches after pain and the chain answers with a kiss that bites. You trap the links under your boot, feel the metal's cold religion climb through felt, and Gennady levers slack with a bar, hip, not hero. The man swallows a noise and the Feldscher arrives with iodine breath and lamp fat, shakes his head at stupidity, and wraps the fingers in rags that used to be shirts and are now policy. He orders movement, not rubbing, rule of feet, and sends the man to carry breath from one end of the pit to the other until his hands remember their names. You blow heat into your mitten and smell fish and iron and a sweetness you can't trust. The wind pockets it anyway, ungrateful and thorough. Break his balander with aspirations and bread that remembers flour as gossip. The tin burns your lip at the rim and chills your teeth in the belly. Steam rises with cabbage ghosts and dies a finger above the bowl. The Etap boy warms his postcard under his shirt like a hand-sized stove and reads one line quietly to no one, the street name, then stops before the adjective, as if adjectives were contraband. You tax your own ration to salt his, 2 grains that crackle like a promise. His eyes water in a grammar that has nothing to do with weather. Plyusha taxes the Lee with oranges again, pockets a cigarette butt like a coin from a country that still believes, and smiles with half his teeth at the horizon as if it owed him change. The Brigadier pins fresh miracles, Stakhanovite feats that rhyme with lies, and the corners curl from a cold that doesn't care for fonts. Afternoon is overtime sold as pride. Shtumovka bleeds the clock while the slope keeps asking for more brush, more wire, more men who will not be here in spring. You drag bundles until twine engraves the mitt into a new species. Rope hums through your shoulder in a low, sawing voice and leaves its name under the padding, slow and permanent. A sledge hits a buried stump and spits you forward. Your shin finds the runner, and the world goes white in that tidy way pain prefers. You see coins behind your eyes and breathe through wool that tastes like iron and old tea until the curtain lifts. Gennady says hip, not hero, seats the rollers with a joiner's boredom, and the load sulks forward, inching like paperwork. Steam climbs your sleeves and freezes into glass freckles. The seam burns cold and signs its name along your ribs. Gate search is the old liturgy, belts slapping, hats confessing sweat salt, pockets yawning their clean lies. The punishment box exhales a ribbon that blooms and withers on the jam, cough by cough, frost flower by flower. In the mess the drum sermon's barley in theory. The ladle bangs its homily until you say amen with your spoon. The stew tastes of pennies and boiled history. You add patience until it admits a body might live. Gennady unveils a toe plate cut from sardine tin, crimped with a spoon and oiled with the salt ghosts. He tacks it under your sock with thread that remembers hands better than names. Plyusha wins and loses a spoon on principle, dreams with a grin that shows old bites, and collects rent in shadows that don't fit in pockets. The Etap boy sleeps with the postcard under his shirt like a small stove. Outside, Chain speaks one link and then reconsiders, and the wind practices handwriting on the wall until sleep stamps your file approved without comment. Morning fogs the yard in a grey that tastes of herring ghosts and tar. The board nails down a fresh sentence. River channeling, kilometre 153, chip overflow, cut drains, borrow sand. The Brigadier's pencil squeaks like a mouse under glass and then pretends it meant to sing. Your scarf has minted itself again. You bite it open and your mouth fills with coins and wool. The guard with red ears issues a pick that leans, a spade that sulks, and a rope that smells of salt ghosts. He tells you the plan loves vigour, then rubs his ears like that counts. Plyusha collects rent in lee space with the generosity of winter. His chain breathes punctuation against your ribs while he calls you poet like a bruise that we'll read later. The wind shuffles, drifts into tidy files by shin height. It stamps your cheeks with sand, fine ice, and asks for a signature. If you're listening near a kettle that behaves, rate the steam. Ours is breath that forgets kindness by design. At the river lip, the overflow ice shows its glass bones in blue. It cracks under the adze with a china clink that feels rich until your toes go numb. Brush fire stinks of cat and Christmas. Steam climbs your sleeves and turns traitor a hand later, freezing into grit that scratches when you lift. The permafrost sweats black and offended. The shovel lip rings thin coin. Your wrists answer in the same metal. The guard praises enthusiasm as if it were a ration. Your shoulder answers with a slow, bureaucratic fire that writes its name under the padding. Plyusha angles his boys into the lee and leaves you the weather. In return, he offers a story about oranges and pockets your shadow. You trade him a minute of windbreak for a rumour about a samovar in the office that smells like real tea. The rumour tastes like glue and rooms. Break his balander with ambitions and bread that remembers flour as gossip. Steam rises one finger and retires. The tin burns your lip at the rim and chills your teeth in the middle. Your tongue negotiates both and loses. The Etap boy warms his postcard under his shirt like a hand stove, then reads the street name without the adjective again. He keeps the adjective for later, which is how people save badly. You salt his tin with 2 grains, they crackle like tiny oaths, and his eyes water in a grammar that has nothing to do with weather. Gennady shaves a sliver from a stolen scrap and wedges it into your boot seam. The curl smells of Attican patience. Pine needle tea steeped in a sardine lid coughs forest into the room. Cat, Attic, a sweetness with opinions, and the guard pretends not to see because paperwork dislikes nuance. Outside, a gull soars inland nonsense. The wind pockets the sound and denies possession. Afternoon sells familiar verbs: drag, wedge, tamp, breathe, regret. A spoil face slumps with a sigh like old bread. A man's ankle vanishes and reappears at a wrong angle, all arithmetic and no blood. You plant the bar, hip not hero, while Gennady levers with a joiner's boredom. The rock sulks back an inch, then 2, and the ankle learns to be probable again. The Feldschir arrives, trailing iodine breath and lamp fat, wraps the joint in rags that used to be shirts and are now policy, and orders movement without rubbing. Rule of feet, law of survival, final exam daily. Rope hums through your shoulder, saws a careful groove and signs its name. Diesel paints warmth on your tongue and wanders off. Resin smoke sits lower, sweet until it bites. The wind writes small, mean sentences across your cheeks, grain by grain, clerk by clerk, and you sign every one with breath you can't afford to spend. In the mess, the drum sermon's barley and theory. The ladle bangs a homily you answer with your spoon because amen has calories. The stew tastes of pennies, cabbage ghosts, and a fish that applied and was denied. You chew patience into it until it admits employment. The stove tender, petty king of ash. Rations glow with a poker that thinks it's a sceptre. He accepts a cigarette butt as tribute and calls it tax. Plyusha misplaces a spoon on principle and finds it on rumour. His grin shows old bites and new philosophy. A rumour of samovar finds the room. All glue and paper and a memory of leaves. It warms nothing. Mail arrives like theatre. The Etap boy reads the next 2 words and stops because the ink's smeared. He keeps the stamp for smell, glue and rooms, sunlight under glass. Gennady tacks another shaving into a crack above the bunk. The draft sulks and learns a new sentence. Night puts its coat back on and sits. The stove's iron belly exhales stingy grace. Tar sweet, cabbage thick, and the pipe ticks like a metronome set to endurance. Lice patrol seam lines like clerks with lanterns. Your nails file appeals and win small itchy verdicts. The Aurora threatens a green ledger at the rim, then folds its case. Outside, Chain speaks one link and reconsiders. A dog edits the dark with one wire-thin bark. You tuck bread under belt, spoon in boot, heel over plate of sardine tin oiled with salt ghosts. Your wealth fits under 2 ribs and 1 soul. Sleep signs your form without reading, stamps approved in breath, shelves you under back tomorrow, and the last thing you taste is iron, and the last thing you hear is chain, and the last thing you own is the idea you might breathe again for free. Morning hands you water for a job that hates warmth. The board says, sluice clean-up kilometre 154, riffles, sand, drains, a sentence that puts your hands in a river that bites. The yard breathes grey cabbage and tar around your knees. Your scarf has coined itself again and you break it with your teeth. Wool and iron, small change. The guard with red ears issues pikes that smell of old fish and rust. The wood is polished where other palms negotiated. Plyusha skims the line for Lee rent and pockets 3 minutes of air from men who can't spare them. His chain whispers punctuation against your ribs while he calls you poet like a bruise that will read later. The sky is pewter, the kind that bends but saves its temper for evening. If you're listening from a room where a tap runs clear and friendly, rate the treason. Our taps are rivers with knives and opinions. At the box the sluice planks wear a varnish of cold, and the riffles hoard black sand like misers. Fire-thaw smokes cat and Christmas against the splash. Steam kisses wrists and then betrays you, freezing into glass freckles along the cuffs. You lift riffle bars that bite with a polite persistent sting. Mercury is only a rumour today, which is good because rumour alone already tastes like coins. The shovel rings thin coin on stone. Grit jumps and pings off the tin lip into your teeth. A wind lifts and salts your mouth with ice. You work with lips closed because verbs cost more air than nouns. Gennady fits a pry between slat and frame like a joiner setting a hinge. The plank sighs, water chuckles, and the box spits up its sand with grudging honesty. Your shoulders burn a slow, bureaucratic red under the padding where the rope writes its name. The Brigadier pencils a warm lie on the board and the wind edits it to frost. Break is Balander with ambitions and bread that remembers flour as gossip. Steam rises one finger and retires. The Etap boy warms his postcard under his shirt like a small stove, reads the street name again, and stops at the adjective because adjectives are for later. You salt his tin with 2 grains that crackle like tiny oaths. His eyes water in a grammar that has nothing to do with weather. Plyusha taxes the Lee with oranges again and pockets a smell of your soup that wasn't there. His grin shows old bites and new philosophy. The guard with red ears pretends not to see kindness to save everyone paperwork. Gennady shows you how to wedge a shaving into the boot seam over the heel plate so the draft forgets the route. The curl smells of attic and patience. Diesel breath from a truck paints a memory of ovens on your tongue and then wanders off to warmer lips. The river keeps talking to itself in a language of clinks. Afternoon graduates to pike work. An ice jam forms where the channel narrows and the river stacks glass panes that argue. You and Gennady lean into the poles until the shoulders ring. Wood groans, ice answers with china clinks, and the wetted gloves become law. A floe rides up, stalls, then decides to remember motion and shoves a wave over the plank. It finds your boot and keeps going up the seam like a clerk climbing floors. The guard with red ears says hip, not hero, and for once he's right. You pry at the lip until the sheet sighs and slides, and the jam loosens, chunks drifting like stubborn thoughts finally choosing a door. Rope hums through your shoulder, saws its careful groove, signs its name. Steam climbs your sleeves and freezes into freckles that scratch. Time files itself in the river's backs. You fall into that time because resistance costs soup. The mess performs its nightly sermon. Drum, ladle, amen. Barley tastes of pennies, cabbage ghosts fog the rafters. A fish that applied was denied but left its autograph on the water. You hold the tin until ache becomes permission. The rim burns, the middle chills, and your mouth negotiates both. The Cultural Brigade's accordion wheezes a march that smells of varnish and old sweat. The lamp hums and warms the ceiling more than men. Plyusha wins and loses a spoon on principle. The stove tender rations glow with a poker that thinks it is a sceptre and accepts a cigarette butt as tax. Gennady teaches the Etap boy to stitch a sock heel with thread that remembers hands. The boy nods at the postcard like it's an elder and puts it back under his shirt. Someone tries a joke about summer without sound. His lips shape it like a secret that costs breath. Night throws its coat over the barracks and sits. The stove's iron belly exhales tar-sweet stinginess. The pipe ticks like a metronome set to endurance. Lice patrol seam lines with lantern zeal, and your nails file small appeals, winning verdicts you spend at once. Outside, Chain speaks one link and then reconsiders. A dog edits the dark with a single wire-thin note. Snow whispers on the roof, then shifts and remembers weight. Rafters answer in tired wood. You tuck bread under belt and spoon in boot and call it savings. The sardine tin heel plate warms just enough to lie, and you forgive it because lying is a kind of work. Breath builds a ceiling cloud that sweats and snows back in petty weather. The straw crackles with insect grammar that doesn't need you to understand. The last thing you taste is iron. The last thing you hear is water clinking its teeth under ice practicing. Sometime deep in the grey, the door remembers how to open and a voice orders snow fence, outer post. You stand into boots that only half forgive. The night takes collateral from your lungs and pays you in needles. The yard smells of tar, ash, metal cooling, stars feel sharpened. You lean into a rope with 5 others until runners croak. The fence line ghosts up, rime-bearded, and the wire sings a thin, mean note under mittened hands. Breath lifts and crystallizes, confetti that refuses celebration. The wind writes its short, bitter alphabet across your cheeks and asks for a signature. You sign with steam you can't afford. When the guard dismisses you, the door breathes heat you didn't earn. You walk back through it as if you could own any of this. If you're listening from a room where the kettle keeps its promises with obedient heat, rate it. Hours keeps minutes and then leaves. Morning tastes like coins and stove ghosts. The board nails a new sentence to the post. Spillway Cuts, kilometre 155, Channel Spring, Protect Base, which sounds almost like Mercy until you remember spring here as a rumour with knives. Steam puddles low and grey around knees, flavoured with cabbage and tar. Your scarf has minted itself again and you bite it open, wool and iron, small change on the tongue. The guard with red ears rubs life into them as if warmth were a task and issues you a pick that leans, a spade that sulks, and a rope that smells of salt ghosts and old fish. Plyusha collects rent in Lee space with the generosity of winter, chain-breathing punctuation at your ribs while he calls you poet like a bruise that we'll read later. If you're hearing this from a room where a tap runs friendly, rate the treason. Ours are ditches with opinions, water with a grudge, and numbers that convert breath into gravel. At the cut, the ice shows its glass bone and the bank wears whiskers of hoarfrost that sting the wrist where your mitten remembers a hole. Brushwood stinks of cat and Christmas. Flame licks your knuckles, shiny through wool, then deserts you to the wind that files reports on skin. The shovel lip rings thin coin when it taps the buried lens, and the ground exhales a damp leaf metal smell as if forgery just became a season. You step the bank and it thinks about trust, then decides against it. Crust collapses to slurry and a cold hand climbs your boot seam like a clerk taking the stairs. Gennady plants a pry, hip not hero, and the bank sulks back into shape by a finger. Your calf seizes clean and arrogant, pain writing a line you almost admire. The brigadier pencils a warm lie about progress. The wind edits it into frost and pins it to your moustache. Break is Balander with ambitions, and bread that remembers flour as gossip. Steam rises one finger, salting your face, and retires. The tin burns at the rim and chills in the middle, whether inside a bowl. The Etap boy warms his postcard under his shirt like a hand-sized stove, reads the street name softly to nobody, and pockets the adjective for later, as if adjectives could be saved like sugar. You salt his tin with 2 grains. They crackle and his eyes water in a grammar that has nothing to do with wind. Plyusha taxes the Lee with oranges again, charges admission in cigarette ends and opinions, and pockets a smell of your soup that wasn't there. Diesel breath from a truck paints a memory of ovens on your tongue and then wanders off to better stories. Gennady slips a thin shaving into your heel seam, over the sardine tin plate. It smells of attic and patience and lies well enough to be useful. Afternoon teaches rope grammar. You and 3 others marry corduroy to mud that insists on stone. The runners croak on the crown, and the rope hums through your shoulder like a bow on gut, sawing a line under the padding and signing its name a letter at a time. A knot you trusted forgets itself and spits slack. The load yaws, the runner barks your shin, and the world goes white the way paper does right before someone writes on it. Gennady says hip, not hero, and reseats the roller with a joiner's boredom while you blink coins through wool and find your breath in instalments. The guard with red ears compliments vigour as if vigour paid rations. You answer with a nod because language is expensive. Steam climbs your sleeves, turns traitor halfway, and freckles your cuffs into glass that scratches when you lift. By the time the sled sulks into place, your shoulders have turned to ledgers full of neat, unpaid entries. Inspection arrives wrapped in a coat that smells of glue and rooms. A deputy from road management steps down from a truck that coughs perfume, diesel and leather, and pronounces the channel exemplary in a voice that marries punctuation to appetite. He sips tea that remembers leaves and fogs his moustache like a small republic. His clipboard shows numbers that will become orders, then quotas, then soup that tastes like coins. The brigadier glows 2 degrees warmer, and the pencil writes faster, pleased to be believed. The guards practice neutrality, which smells like oil and boredom. Plyusha claps at the right moments with a grin that shows old bites and new philosophy. He pockets a wink from the deputy-like change he plans to spend later. You stand with riverdamp cuffs crisping to ice, throat full of tin air, and practice the art of staying real while the room around the clipboard pretends to be a country. Night glues itself to the barracks with cabbage tar. Gate search is the old liturgy. Belt slap, hat humility, pockets yawning clean lies. The punishment box exhales a ribbon that blooms and withers on the jam, cough by cough. In the mess, the drum sermons barley and theory. You hold the tin until ache becomes heat and heat becomes permission. The stew tastes of pennies, boiled history, and a fish that applied and was denied. You chew patience into it until it admits work. Gennady stitches the Etap boy's sock heel with thread, that remembers hands better than names. The boy smiles at the postcard's stamp. Glue, rooms, sunlight under glass, and returns it under his shirt where it can be a stove the size of hope. The stove tender rations glow with a poker that believes it is a sceptre. He accepts a cigarette butt as tax and calls it culture. Outside, Chain speaks one link and then reconsiders. The wind practices handwriting on the wall, careful and mean. Morning arrives with the tone of a ledger cleared of excuses. The board reads, Culvert Lips, kilometre 156, reset, pack, tie, which is how a road says it intends to keep breathing. Steam hovers low and grey around knees, wool sour and cabbage bit. Your scarf has coined itself again and you bite it open, iron and yesterday on the tongue. The guard with red ears rubs life into them as if heat were a chore. Hands you a bar that lists left, a mallet with other men's sweat dried into ridges, and a coil of wire that smells of river and rust. Plyusha collects rent in lee space because winter respects landlords. His chain breathes punctuation at your ribs while he calls you poet like a bruise that we'll read later. Boards squeal like violins tuned by a man who dislikes music. Breath salts the scarf and turns to coins you have to crack with your teeth. The wind files your cheeks into workable shapes, grain by grain. It rearranges the drifts by shin height like a tidy clerk and waits for signatures. If you're listening from a room where a kettle behaves, rate the treason. Ours is breath that forgets kindness and charges compound interest. At the ditch, the culvert mouth sulks under snow and sand like a patient liar. Brushwood stinks of cat and Christmas while it burns. Steam kisses your wrists and then betrays you, freezing into glass freckles along the cuff that scratch when you lift. The shovel lip rings thin coin on hidden stone. Grit pings into your teeth and writes a dry sentence behind the eyes. You pry the barrel lip true with hip, not hero. Gennady packs brush against the shoulder like laths, muttering about bite and drift until the curve admits it was wrong. The mallet translates stubborn into a language the bank understands. Each thud knocks dust from the cold and shakes it back down as sting. Rope hums through your shoulder like bow on gut, sawing a careful groove under the padding and signing its name one slow letter at a time. The brigadier pencils a warm lie about progress. The wind edits in frost and pins it to your moustache. Somewhere a gull saws inland nonsense and nobody bothers replying. Breakers Belander with ambitions and bread that remembers flour as gossip. Steam rises one finger and retires. The tin burns your lip at the rim and chills your teeth in the belly. The Etap boy warms his postcard under his shirt like a hand-sized stove and reads the street name again and not the adjective, saving it the way men save sugar, for later that keeps moving. You salt his tin with 2 grains and they crackle like tiny oaths. His eyes water in a grammar that has nothing to do with wind. Plyusha taxes the lee with oranges again and pockets a smell of your soup that wasn't there. His grin shows old bites and new philosophy. Diesel paints warmth on your tongue and wanders off. Resin smoke sits lower, sweet until it bites. Gennady slides a thin shaving into your heel seam, over the sardine tin plate. It smells of attic and patience and lies well enough to be useful. You lick the tin because respect for dishware is character here, and character can sometimes be boiled. Afternoon is sledges and grammar. Rope hums through your shoulder like bow on gut, sawing a careful groove under the padding and signing its name one grind at a time. A runner bites a buried knot and slaps your shin. The world goes white the tidy way paper does before anyone writes on it. Gennady says hip, not hero, and reseats the roller with a joiner's boredom while you bargain breath in coins through wool. A truck coughs diesel that tastes like remembered ovens, belief flares and dies. The road shrugs and asks for more verbs. Wire saws your mitten in a polite, persistent way. The sting will become philosophy by evening and ice by night. You tamp the embankment until your knees say they understand religion. The mallet answers with a doctrine in your bones. Snow starts its small, mean, sideways, stinging cheekbones, salting lashes, turning steam into grit you blink through. When the sledge finally sulks into place, the rope has written its signature so deep under the padding you can read it with your teeth. Inspection drifts by in a coat that smells of glue and rooms, a deputy with a clipboard that copies itself when it's praised. He sips tea that remembers leaves and fogs his moustache like a small republic. He underlines numbers that will become orders that will become quotas, that will become soup that tastes like coins. The brigadier brightens 2 degrees and the pencil performs obedience. Plyusha claps at the right moments like a man tipping his hat to a mirror he plans to sell. You stand with river-damp cuffs crisping to ice, throat full of tin air, and practice the art of staying real while the room around the clipboard pretends to be a country. A guard quotes a poem about production that rhymes with obedience and pockets a cigarette butt for his trouble. The tea smells like glue and rooms pretending gentler weather. The deputy leaves in a truck that coughs perfume, and the wind walks back in to count you. Night smears tar up the rafters. Gate search repeats the old liturgy. Belt slap, hat humility, pockets yawning clean lies. The punishment box exhales a ribbon that blooms and withers on the jam, cough by cough, frost flower by frost flower. In the mess, the drum sermons, barley and theory. The ladle bangs its homily until you say amen with your spoon. The stew tastes of pennies, boiled history, and a fish that applied and was denied. You chew patience into it until it admits work. Gennady stitches a heel into the Atap boy's sock with thread that remembers hands better than names. The boy smiles at the stamp. Glue and rooms, sunlight under glass, and slides it back under his shirt where it can be a stove the size of hope. The stove-tender rations glow with a poker that believes it is a sceptre and accepts a cigarette butt as tax. The stove breathes tar-sweet apology that doesn't reach anyone's hands. Outside, Chain speaks one link and thinks better. The wind practices handwriting on the wall, careful and mean. Lights down is not dark, only less. Breath builds a ceiling cloud that sweats and snows back on faces in petty weather. Lice patrol seams with lantern zeal in your nails when small, itchy verdicts you spend at once. Straw crackles with insect grammar. The pipe ticks time for a band that knows one song. You tuck bread under belt, spoon in boot, heel over sardine tin oiled with salt ghosts. Your wealth fits under 2 ribs and 1 soul. The last thing you taste is iron. The last thing you hear is chain. The last thing you own is breath you can't afford to spend. And outside, the wind finishes writing your name, files it under back tomorrow, and walks away without looking to see if you're still reading.